Wave Sound Audiobooks presents an unabridged recording of The Drop-Off by Fiona Harris and Mike McLeish, narrated by the authors with Guyton Grantley. Dedication. For Finn and Abby, who have taught us how to be grown-ups, but still let us act like kids.
It's not right that someone so pretty should have to be around idiots like us. But it's kind of like she's got a force field around her. Like the stink can't touch her. I watched her again today. She's amazing. I didn't know a girl could be that strong and that pretty at the same time. It's like she's breaking the rules. And I'll say it to her if I get the chance. I'll say it to her after the first time we're together. I'll kiss her, and I'll say, "You're amazing." And she'll smile and kiss me back. And I'll say, "Will you be mine?" And she will. And then everyone will know. And I'll hold her hand and bring her sausage rolls with sauce on the side, because she likes to pick up her sausage roll and wipe it in the sauce in a circle around her plate. And I'll learn heaps more things about her like that, so I can do more things like that for her. So I can be a good husband for her.
Lizzie. Hey, buddy. So maybe I should start at the beginning like most good stories do. Nope. Delete, delete, delete. Dear Greg, I have a story to tell you. Worse. Are my hands Christian Anderson now? Delete, delete, delete. Hey, Greg. So yesterday I was at school drop-off when I saw... Too sudden. Got to ease him into it. Shit. This was hard. Clearly it had been a while since I'd written anything more challenging than the labour ward register. Dear Greg, I have to tell you something. And it's probably best if I tell you in chronological order. Well, yesterday when I was... Mum! Someone stole my hoodie. Oh, damn it. I'll call Interpol, I yelled back. Unless it's still in your bag from last term. I already looked there. The volume of Zara's voice was escalating. I saved my few measly words as Lizzie's Christmas presents and closed it. Greg would rather commit harakiri than peek at his wife's secret gift ideas. His ruddy face grinned out at me from the framed photo beside the computer, as if saying, "Yep, I'm an honourable bugger, all right." The photo was taken on the beach last summer, and the 6 laughing faces in the photo, including my own, were all mashed into each other. It looked like someone had squished us into a fishbowl. Zara was missing her right arm, and the bottom half of Max's face was cut off. Not my husband's forte, the art of the selfie. After a series of epic fails, Greg had finally managed to take this single half-decent shot before we'd all collapsed backwards onto a bed of wet, sandy towels. There was a distinct twang in my chest, like someone had just reached in and plucked the top of my ribcage with a plectrum. Greg deserved to know the truth, which meant I had to make time to finish the letter. In hindsight, 8:25 a.m. on a school morning hadn't been the wisest choice. Had I honestly expected to get through the opening sentence, let alone a paragraph, without one of my 4 offspring demanding my attention? I was lucky to get through my first "we" without interruption, let alone write a life-changing letter to my husband. If I wasn't so gutless, I'd have an actual conversation with the man. We did live in the same house after all. But Greg had never been one for scenes, a word Zara used to describe any conversation that escalated beyond a quiet chat over a cup of Milo. And the chat I needed to have with Greg could well grow from a scene into a full-blown drama. The man I'd married 12 years ago was an unassuming 6'2" brick shithouse Aussie wary of any man who confessed to no interest in footy or hard work, and with a deep love for his family, beer, and shepherd's pie. The order of the latter two were interchangeable, depending on his mood, but they were always a distant runner-up to his family. Us. A lot of people take in Greg Barrett's stubbled face and paint-spattered overalls and make the assumption that there isn't a whole lot going on upstairs. But not only was my husband a born workhorse and naturally kind-hearted, he was also full lurch-forward funny, loyal and cluey as hell. However, not cluey enough to know that his wife had been keeping a secret from him for the past 15 years. So I'd mapped out my ingenious plan in bed last night. 1. Finish letter before next early shift. 2. Get up extra early and leave letter on front seat of Greg's work van. 3. Make quick escape to early shift so Greg could read letter while I was safe at work. No man I knew, except maybe Sam, would be foolish enough to confront his wife in a place full of women who are in the worst pain they're ever likely to experience. Greg would be torn to shreds in seconds. A pack of hungry wolves would be more merciful. Mum! What? Zara, half-dressed and bursting with preteen rage, stood in the doorway. At 11, she was already as tall as me, had her dad's white blonde hair and green eyes, and was whippet thin. Obsessed with comics, CGI and coding, Zara planned to work for Pixar when she grew up. Aside from her impatience, my eldest daughter was prone to hypersensitivity and could be moodier than the hottest, most tormented teenage vampire. But she was also a brilliant mimic who made me laugh more than any of my other kids. My hoodie? Zara's head was at a 45-degree angle, her hands on her bony hips. Have you looked in your wardrobe? Yes. Did you find Harold Holt in there while you were at it? After 2 weeks of school holidays, Zara's bedroom had reached a level of chaos that a black hole would applaud. What? She shook her head like she was addressing a malfunctioning printer. Even if your hoodie was in that wardrobe, you'd need the full Beaconsfield team to get it out. What are you talking about? Zara said. I just need my hoodie. I'm meeting Amy on the corner in 5 minutes. I marched through the house with an almost hyperventilating Zara close behind. Along the way, I hollered instructions to my other children, only some of whom were visible. Max! Lego! In its box or in the bin. Stella! You know there's no TV on school mornings. Archie! Why are your runners on the toaster? That's just... At the doorway to Zara's room, I was struck dumb with astonishment. It looked like it had been ransacked by small-time mobsters who most definitely did not find what they were looking for. Clothes, shoes, comics, graphic novels, necklaces, various lip balms, books and earrings covered every square inch of every available space. Zara had always been a slob, but this was some next-level shit. Can you find it? Are you kidding me? I spun around to face her. Zara, I can't find your bed. Oh, it's not that bad, she said sulkily. I just pulled a few things out. Ozzy Osbourne is neater than you. Okay, seriously, Mum, she said, patting me on the arm. Enough with the old people references. Stella pushed past me and stared in horror at the apocalypse that was also her bedroom. I cleaned this room last night. She flung her skinny arms around like Kermit the Frog being operated by the work experience kid. You have no respect for my space. Ugh, don't be such a drama queen, Zara said, rolling her eyes. It's just a few clothes. Stella tugged at her long golden plaits in despair. huge eyes almost popping out of their sockets. As long as she continued to live in our 3-bedroom house, the office doubled as the dining room, poor Stella had to share a room with Zara. It was the old Felix Unger and Oscar Madison story, but with 2 cantankerous prepubescent sisters instead of 2 grumpy 50-something men. Sometimes it seemed to me that Stella was a 45-year-old tax accountant trapped in the body of an 8-year-old. She wanted to be a corporate social responsibility events manager when she grew up. I had no idea what uni course she needed to enrol in for that. It was best to intervene before my youngest daughter self-combusted. Zara, this room is to be spotless by the time you go to bed tonight, or no bounce with Cara on Saturday. I took an almost catatonic Stella by the shoulders and turned her away from the scene of devastation. And you can borrow Archie's spare hoodie for today, I called back as I continued steering Stella down the hallway. Archie's hoodie smells like feet. Your bum smells like feet, Archie yelled as we passed his bedroom. Honestly, a sea sponge had a sharper wit than my son. Yeah, good comeback, I said, popping my head into Archie and Max's room. Archie was sprawled across his green rug, drawing a character I could only assume was Spider-Man. He'd recently seen the Tom Holland version and was now obsessed. Spider-Man drawings of all shapes and sizes were pinned in meandering rows on the corkboard above his wooden desk, covering faded sketches of Han Solo and Darth Vader. Take your manky shoes off my toaster, please, I told him, releasing Stella to continue stumbling down the hallway like a baby giraffe. Archie, now. What? Archie said, without raising his head. Who's having toast? Archie couldn't have been more different from his twin, Zara. Greg and I secretly called him the absent-minded professor. Archie was academically gifted, but his lack of social skills was matched only by his inability to conjure up a decent comeback to his sister's sass. He also did things like pop his runners on top of a kitchen appliance. And the poor kid did stink. No matter how many times I washed that damn hoodie, it still smelt, as Zara said, like feet. His runners reeked like blue cheese. I detested blue cheese, hence my outrage at the sight of those runners propped on my toaster like a wanky art exhibit. He put them there while he was brushing his teeth with my electric toothbrush, Max announced, running into the room he shared with Archie, carrying what looked like his entire collection of Lego. Max dumped what remained in his arms into the huge box in the corner of the room, dropping at least half the pieces as he went. There! Max, my baby, was only 6, so rarely moved slower than a power walk, and bore the remnants of one condiment or another on his face at all times. Let's just be grateful he didn't pop the electric toothbrush into the toaster or we'd all be stuffed, I said, picking up a Lego fuselage. Swear jar. Stuffed is not a swear word, I called back to Stella. Now turn that TV off or you'll hear a real one. I'm going... A hoodieless, Zara announced, opening the front door. And you're going to be wrecked with guilt for the rest of your life when I die of hypothermia. Racked, sweetie, I said, plucking a tiny policeman's helmet from between my bare toes. I'll be racked with guilt. I loved my kids, but Jesus, they gave me the shits. After ordering Max, Stella and Archie to complete the morning routine of teeth, shoes and lunchbox in school bags for the 88th time, I decided to get dressed myself. Our bedroom wasn't much tidier than Zara and Stella's, but I was the parent, so, do as I say, not as I do. Housework had been dropping down the priority list for a while now, with school holidays and my hours at the hospital ramping up before my long service leave in a few months. And now, Rick Cook. Rick fucking Cook had appeared out of nowhere like a giant, painful pimple that you really want to squeeze but knew you shouldn't for fear it would only double in size and life expectancy. Thank God Sam had stolen that stupid bloody hat, or I might never have spotted Rick when I did and got the hell out of there before he spotted me. That was 24 hours ago, but I was still shaking. It had started out like any other Tuesday morning drop-off, with Megan, Sam and I convening on our bench in the Bay Tree Primary Schoolyard to share whatever was on our minds. Sam and Megan were my drop-off mates, and together we drank coffee and talked shit for a few precious minutes each day. Sam had just handed us our coffees when Megan glanced over at something and frowned. "Hey, Sam, did Lola get caught eating her lunch in the toilets again?" "No. Why?" She nodded towards the playground where kids were doing death drops off the monkey bars, swinging upside down from the top of the flying fox and wobbling across the chain bridge. Some younger siblings, dragged along to drop off with no choice in the matter, were chewing bark chips, maybe as a form of protest. In the middle of this bedlam stood Penny Guthrie, principal of Bay Tree Primary, talking intently to Sam's daughter, Lola, who was looking up at Penny and shaking her head. "Ooh," I crowed, "Lola's in trouble with the principal." It was strange to see Sam's well-behaved, if slightly odd, daughter being told off. Lola had always stood out from the rest of Stella's grade 3 class. She wore her school dress long, at least 6 inches below her knees, piled her long dark hair into a high-top bun, and used words no one expected to hear coming out of an 8-year-old's mouth, like objectionable and ne'er-do-well. Lola Hatfield was kooky. I liked her. "I hope she hasn't been quoting Jane Austen to her classmates again," Sam said, fiddling nervously with the lid of his coffee. At her last Lit Circle session, she told Charlie Briggs he was illiterate and coarse. "Guthrie creeps me out," Megan said, looking down at her phone. "No, I wouldn't call her creepy," Sam said. "Thatcher-esque, maybe." Penny Guthrie dressed exactly the way you'd imagine a school principal would, if it was 1955. Knitted turtleneck, blazer, slacks, and black pumps. She wore minimal makeup on her pale skin, and her blonde hair was in a low ponytail, held in place with more hairspray than necessary. Behind her sharp eyes was an unnerving calm that had undoubtedly developed from years spent dealing with young children and, more to the point, their parents. She'd replaced the previous principal, who'd been at the school for over a decade, at the start of this year. It couldn't have been easy, starting from scratch with all the teachers, kids and parents, especially parents as disinterested as Bay Tree parents. So we weren't exactly qualified to judge how creepy or not creepy she was, considering none of us had engaged her in conversation. "Oh, shit," Sam said, squeezing his takeaway cup so hard that the lid popped off. "She's coming over." Sure enough, Penny Guthrie was on the move, hands behind her back, crunching her way across a carpet of bark chips. "Relax, Chicken Little," I said. "She's heading back to her office." But Penny suddenly veered left and headed straight towards us. "Oh, shit," Megan hissed. "She is coming over here. You're fucked. And you've got coffee on your jeans." "Good morning," Penny said, approaching us with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Penny," Megan and I chorused cheerily. "Hello." Megan, Oscar Wiley's mum. Lizzie, many kids' mum. "Good morning," she said, before turning to address Sam. "You're Sam, Lola's dad?" He gave the tiniest, most reluctant nod an adult could give a principal. "I noticed you going through the lost property bin yesterday at pickup," Penny said, her frozen smile faltering slightly. "Yeah, it's like a bottomless pit, that thing," Sam chuckled. perhaps in some misguided attempt to invite Penny to join him in the obvious amusement of the lost property bin. She didn't. Megan's finger dug into my right thigh, and suddenly I was back in Year 9 when Melissa Morton and I tried to suppress our giggles as Mr. Winter leant over our desks and roared, "What the hell is so funny?" "Yes, lost property remains a work in progress," Penny replied. "Did you find what you were looking for?" No, I didn't, unfortunately." Sam was rattled. "But you did find this," Penny said, pulling out a school hat from behind her back. "Lola's hat." Sam reached for it, but Penny held it back. "Is it?" she asked. "Yeah. I think it was." Sam glanced at us in desperation. He'd gone too far with the whole "that's Lola's hat" facade to turn back now. It was hard watching our mate being tortured like this, but we couldn't take our eyes off the slow-motion car crash playing out in front of us. Brilliant stuff for a Tuesday morning. "All right, it's not hers," he confessed, crumbling like stale bread. "But it's her size and there was no name on it. And look, I'm sure the karma of the lost property bin will make sure—" Megan turned to me, her eyebrows raised. "The karma?" "Of the lost property bin," I repeated back to her. Sam ignored us. It's just that I've lost count of how many times Lola's lost her funky school hat this year, and there's still 2 terms to go." "I understand," Penny said. "Kids lose hats. But I would have thought it best for Lola to learn about responsibility and consequences rather than having you steal her a hat. Wouldn't you think, Sam?" "Oh, she was good." "It's July," Megan said, frowning. "Do they really need hats?" "Yes, they do, Megan. School policy." "I'll make sure Lola has a good look for it at home," Sam said. "In the meantime," Penny continued, "she must stay in the shaded Italian garden during recess." Fair enough. Sam was trying to fold in on himself to the point of invisibility. The principal released Sam from her stare and took in all of us. "Are you all coming to Careers Day?" she asked in a bright new tone. "The children are very excited." Sam half nodded and mumbled something incoherent. Megan grinned. "Yep, I'll be there." "I'll have to check my roster," I said, "but I'm really hoping I can make it." I was lying. Standing in front of a room full of 6-year-olds and talking about extracting babies from vaginas wasn't my idea of time well spent. "Yes, well, I hope we'll see you all there," Penny said. "Have a lovely day." Megan turned to Sam the moment Penny was out of earshot. "Still don't think she's creepy?" "You're full of shit." I flicked Megan on the thigh. "Yep, I'll be there." I mimicked Megan's response to Penny. "Since when have you ever gone to something like that?" "I know why she's going," Sam said. "She wants to get the kids to go home and beg Mummy and Daddy to buy clothes from Chill." Chill was Megan's online kids' clothing and accessories business. If it was lit, dope, or legit, I knew these words thanks to Zara, Chill stocked it. The business had over 40,000 followers on Instagram and had won the Kids Fashion Boutique Awards 3 years running. In other words, when it came to kids' fashion, Megan Wiley was legit lit. "I resent that," Megan sniffed. "I'm doing it for the children, Sam. The children?" "All right, Angelina," Sam said. "You going to adopt them too?" "You've lost the moral high ground, hat thief," I said. "It was probably some poor little redhead's precious hat," Megan said. "Redheads never lose their hats," Sam said. "That's life or death for them." "I'd start by looking in the girls' toilets," I said, nodding towards a glum Lola, now sitting alone in the Italian garden like a loser. Stella said Lola always takes her hat off to wash her hands. Something about 19th century etiquette. Sam jumped up and ran towards the girls' bathroom. "He'll be back when he realises he can't go in there," Megan said, going back to her Instagram feed. I grinned, turning my head to watch Sam sprint across the yard. And that's when I saw him. Rick Cook. He was just standing there on the other side of the yard chatting with students. Just standing there. In my school. No one expects someone from their past to crash land in their present like a meteor, and Rick had no right being in my present. He was something I'd left behind, something I'd had to get on the other side of to get here. And Baytree Primary was my turf. It was where I felt comfortable, drank good takeaway coffee and had banal morning chats with my mates. To them, I was Mum Lizzie, honest, good, dependable Lizzie, tough but fair Lizzie. Seeing Rick on my turf had twisted and tested my sense of identity because he knew a different Lizzie, a long-gone Lizzie. Shaken, I'd made some lame excuse to Megan about having to take the dog to the vet and got the hell out of there. As I'd walked home, my heart racing, it dawned on me that after all these years, I had no choice but to finally tell my husband the truth. He was bound to bump into Rick at some point, and I just couldn't have Greg find out what I'd done all those years ago from a stranger. It was unthinkable. But then, so was the idea of Greg finding out who his wife really was. "Mum?" Stella said, dragging me back to the present. "Huh?" She was standing next to me, school bag on and eyebrows raised. "We have to go." I pulled my duffel coat tighter around me and glanced at the school building. I didn't know if it was Melbourne's wind chill factor or fearing that Rick Cook might be around somewhere that was giving me the shivers. I scoped out my surroundings like a canny fugitive. The back gate was in the opposite direction to the building, so if Rick did appear, I had my exit strategy worked out. I shouldn't have come into the school at all, but it was my turn to bring coffee. And apart from the caffeine hit, I really needed a Megan and Sam hit this morning. Megan was a single mum to 6-year-old Oscar and also happened to be unfairly beautiful. When I'd first spotted her at Max's kindergarten concert, I'd immediately assumed that the tall, skinny 30-something with perfect skin and cascading brown blonde locks was a bimbo. As my friend Aileen said, it's perfectly fair not to like attractive people. They're guilty until proven innocent. But Megan had a ferocious mind with a mouth to match, and she was funny. Sam was a full-time house husband and dad to Lola and Tyler. He had a kind face, was a snag in the truest sense of the acronym, and one of the good guys. His wife, Bridget, was a big corporate something or other who was away a lot. Megan and I had never met her, and Sam got a bit weird whenever we brought her up, so we stopped. Fine with us. We loved the Sam we hung out with at drop-off and had little interest in his marriage. The first time I noticed him, not hard, he's 6'3", he was trying to choose between a Kingston and a Monte Carlo at the prep orientation morning. As our offspring sat at tiny tables, literally trying to shove square pegs into round holes, we were banished to the stale-smelling, airless staff room, out of our clingy kids' sight. I knew Sam and I would get along when I clocked him rolling his eyes behind the back of a mum who just hoped her Sebastian would be able to relate to the less mature kids. The location of choice for our daily drop-off chats was a bench in the far corner of the schoolyard. It wasn't that we didn't like other parents. We just weren't particularly interested in finding out whether we liked them or not. But today I'd moved to a different bench, one even further away from the school building and near the netball courts. Wrong bench. Huh? Why are you over here? There are children over here. Megan may as well have said there was a pungent smell of dog shit over here. Less sun. I wasn't ready to tell Megan the truth about Rick yet, if ever. Anyway, it wouldn't be fair to Greg if my friends knew before him. Megan frowned. It's winter. I handed Megan her coffee, hoping to distract her. It worked. Yay! She beamed, grabbing the takeaway cup and sitting beside me. Good morning, ladies. I turned and Megan tilted her torso to look past my shoulder. Hi, Henry. Henry beamed and shuffled a few feet away from the crossing, an invisible tether preventing him from straying too far from his post. Bald, bespectacled, and with a deeply wrinkled face that never surrendered its smile, Henry must have been at least 70, but had the energy of a 50-year-old. He'd been the crossing guard outside Baytree Primary for as long as I could remember. Bit warm for July, he called out. Henry's daily commentary on the weather was as inevitable as the tide. In the 6.5 years I'd been at the school, I'd never heard him voice an opinion on anything else. He and my dad would get along. Old men in the elements seemed to have a very special relationship. Yeah, I called back. Supposed to rain later today. Henry shuffled closer, but Megan gave him a cursory nod and turned her back on him, shutting the conversation down like a disgruntled guest on 60 Minutes. I wanted to keep an eye on Max. I nodded towards my son, who was careening backwards down the slide. Since when? Since he's been having issues with a kid in his class. This was crap. If anyone's kid was going to be causing issues, it would have been mine, but it was all I could come up with on the spot. Which kid? He won't tell me. No point naming and shaming some innocent kid. I was a lying lowlife, but I had standards. Oh, I bet it's that little fucker Charlie, Megan said, curling her lip. That kid needs a slap. Who needs a slap? I looked up to see Sam standing beside the bench. You, Megan said, without missing a beat. Sam turned and poked his bum out towards Megan, who ignored him and went back to her phone. I handed him his coffee. Zara looks cold, Sam said, wrapping his hands around the warm cardboard cup. On the other side of the schoolyard, my daughter was shivering like a junkie. Her friend, Amy, was furiously rubbing Zara's arms, as if trying to start a fire in a snowstorm. How could you let her out like that? Sam asked. It's freezing. Poor thing. It's July, Megan said. Supposed to be cold? You wouldn't be saying poor thing if you'd seen her bedroom, I said to Sam. That kid is going to end up on Hoarders. Megan laughed, and for the first time in 24 hours, I relaxed. Megan. Megan always opened Oscar's lunchbox as if she were unzipping a body bag. Sometimes she'd find something perfectly manageable, like a half-eaten banana or a discarded Le Snack wrapper, but other times it was mashed pieces of strangely shaped cheese, liquefied apple cores, a bread crust that could cut diamonds, or plain old dirt. Dirt. Megan was fairly certain she hadn't packed dirt for her son's recess snack, but there it was, a hefty handful of dirt with a smattering of tan bark. But it was still early in the term and the lunchbox was yet to develop that complex aroma of mould, sugar syrup and 6-year-old boy. She had not missed this after-school routine over the break. Lunchboxes and mystery tan bark were a distant memory at their Barwon Heads Airbnb over the school holidays. Jesus! You said a naughty word, man. Oscar appeared in the doorway, pointing a skinny finger at her. Man was the new big thing in Oscar's vocabulary. Probably picked it up from bloody Adam, Megan thought. Max says his mum has a swear jar. His tone solemn and tiny brow furrowed, and he says it's always full. I'm sure it is, Megan said, smiling. Who told you Jesus was a naughty word? Baytree Primary wasn't a religious school. At least, she couldn't remember seeing any documentation saying it was. Then again, Megan rarely read school correspondence. They could have started lessons on how to join a cult and she wouldn't have had a clue. Nana Clara. Oscar dropped to his belly and wriggled under the counter to retrieve a stray piece of Lego. She said you shouldn't say it so much like you do 'cause it's blasphemous. Jesus Christ. Of course. Who else but Clara Campbell would chastise a 35-year-old woman through a child? Oscar had spent 2 nights with his paternal grandmother on the final weekend of the holidays, and she'd obviously taken the opportunity to further indoctrinate him. Megan wouldn't have been surprised if her son had returned wearing a crucifix around his neck. Her chest burned. She'd become adept at deflecting her ex-mother-in-law's jibes, corrections, and withering judgments. But when Clara started lecturing Megan through her kid, it cut through. I don't care what Nana Clara told you, Megan said. Jesus is only a naughty word if you believe in God, and I don't. But Nana Clara says it's bad not to believe in God. Oscar's voice trembled and his caramel-coloured eyes, so like his dad's, filled with tears. Megan sat on one of her recently purchased, and totally worth the money, matte black bar stools and pulled Oscar onto her knee. She threaded her fingers through his sweaty, honey-coloured fringe and gently brushed it back off his face. Did Nana say something bad might happen to me if I don't believe in God? Oscar nodded, and Megan took a deep breath. It wasn't the first time she'd heard of her wretched post-mortem fate. It had been a weekly warning during the Tuesday night dinners Megan had been forced to endure throughout her 2-year marriage to Bryce. Clara would sit at the head of her polished teak dining room table and, over lukewarm plates of shiny, overcooked silverside and soggy vegetables, assure her there would be no free pass at the pearly gates for non-believers like Megan when she departed this world. The instant Megan Wiley carked it, she was on a one-way express to the fiery pits of hell. The main perk of Megan's divorce 3 years ago was never having to listen to Clara's religious bullshit ever again. Or so Megan had thought. Nothing is going to happen to me just because I don't believe what Nana Clara believes, okay? But God is always watching us like Santa. Oscar was sounding more panicked by the second. He gets angry if you don't believe in him, man. How does Nana Clara know? Megan asked. Has she met God? Don't think so, Oscar frowned. But you haven't met Santa and he's real. Who says I haven't met Santa? Oscar's eyes bugged. Have you? Megan scoffed. We go way back. What's he like? White beard, fat, red suit, twinkle in his eye. You know, pretty much what you'd expect. Have you met God? No, Megan confessed. But I don't believe in him, so that might make it a bit hard. But isn't that a sin? Megan felt as though she was trapped in a purgatorial loop. When she and Bryce had first started dating, Megan had smiled and nodded whenever Clara got going on one of her heaven and hell rants. There were many times Bryce had left his mother's house with tiny purple and yellow bruises on his upper thigh because discreetly pinching her boyfriend under the table was Megan's only outlet during Clara's dinner sermons. Bryce found his mother's ravings amusing, which infuriated Megan even more. Years spent living with a religious zealot had made Bryce impervious to her diatribes. Clara's words seemed to bypass him altogether and, like heat-seeking missiles, ploughed deep into Megan's flaming eardrums instead. She managed to hold her tongue for a couple of years until one night when Megan was 6 months pregnant, tired and hormonal. When Clara raised the subject of her future grandchild's christening, Megan had snapped. "We're not going to christen our baby," she shouted at a shocked Clara. "Religion and all of its bullshit, including dunking babies in God water, are about as relevant as witch burnings or Kodak shops." Megan could feel Bryce's knee gently pressing against hers under the table, but she was on a roll. "It's not going to happen, Clara." Megan threw her hands up, launching overcooked peas off the end of her fork and onto Clara's glistening floor tiles. "There's more chance of me dunking my baby in your soggy mashed potato." Clara turned a disturbing shade of crimson. Seconds passed, and as quickly as Megan's blood pressure had soared, it began to subside. It's the pregnancy, the hormones. Sometimes But she was drowned out by the sound of metal legs scraping across the tiles as Clara slowly pushed her chair back. "I'll just check on the apple pie." Clara had refused to make eye contact with either of them for the remainder of the meal, and they left soon after. Bryce had nicknamed Megan Linda Blair after that, throwing his hands up and shouting, "The power of Christ compels you," whenever she waddled into the room for weeks afterwards, sending her into fits of laughter. But Clara's fanaticism wasn't so amusing when it was poisoning Megan's beautiful boy's mind. "Nothing bad is going to happen to me just because I say a word some people don't like," Megan said. "Nana Clara believes different things to us, but that doesn't mean she's right, okay?" As Oscar nodded and nuzzled into the side of her neck, Megan decided she needed to talk to Bryce about this. They might not be married anymore, but they still shared a belief system when it came to Clara's underhanded schemes to save her grandson's soul. Besides, Megan had assumed Clara had more pressing matters to contend with these days, like saving her own son from those fiery pits. Oh, how Megan wished she could have been there to witness Clara's reaction to the news that her perfect son was leaving his wife for a man. The toilet flushed down the hall, and Megan remembered that she'd actually brought 2 boys home from school. Where's Toby? Megan hadn't seen him since they'd arrived back half an hour ago, and she'd stuffed them both with berries and crackers. "In my room playing Lego," Oscar shrugged. "He's obsessed, man." "Well, his mum's coming soon." Megan lifted Oscar off her knee and gave his bum a tap. "So go play." Oscar ran off and Megan looked at her phone. Just enough time to check chill emails and put in the new stock order. 200 t-shirts emblazoned with Robin Williams in full Mork costume with the words "Nanu Nanu" underneath. No kid would ever have heard of Mork and Mindy, but the kids weren't the ones buying the clothes. Megan was extremely skilled at tapping into parents' nostalgia and knew most of them were less concerned about practicality and more focused on their little ones wearing useful conversation starters. Managing the Instagram, the stock, and the designers kept Megan busy, and the constant demands of running a business on your own was definitely stressful, but she stayed on top of it all for the most part. Chill's office was the front room of Megan's 3-bedroom terrace house, a house that displayed all the signs that one of its inhabitants was a small boy. Her sense of style meant their house could get away with a certain level of mess. The furnishings were so chic that anything that was on top of them, a lunchbox on the stove, a toy dinosaur on the couch, a frayed book and a banana peel on the coffee table, looked deliberate, like they had been carefully placed there by an interior designer staging a photo shoot. Megan opened her laptop and rolled her eyes when she saw an email requesting donations to some kids' charity. She knew if she donated to one, the internet's sneaky algorithms would kick into gear and the rest would come a-knockin'. It was no way to run a business. Sure, she believed refugees deserved more humane treatment and that doctors who land in war zones should be protected, It was just easier to take care of her own world. Delete. The second email wasn't much better. A reminder from Oscar's school that they were looking for volunteers for the end-of-year school concert. Megan scoffed. Yeah, not likely, she thought, as if I don't have enough on my plate already. Delete. An hour later, Megan was composing a lengthy email to a new wholesaler who was trying to convince her that his prices weren't retail. Nice try, mate. When the doorbell rang. Shit. Damned punctual parents. Well, that was the end of her working day, at least until Oscar was in bed. A short, frazzled-looking mum in loose tracksuit pants and a striped threadbare t-shirt smiled as Megan opened the door. "Hi," she trilled. "I'm Janie, Toby's mum." "Hey," Megan said, turning to head down the hallway. "I'll get Toby." "Oh, okay," she heard the woman say. "I'll just, wait here then?" "Okay," Megan called back. The last thing she needed was this woman hinting for a friendly cup of tea. Megan had nothing personal against Toby's mum, except for the fact that she was wearing Kmart tracksuit pants with Crocs, but she wasn't open to a potential new friendship just because their sons were mates. Lizzie and Sam were all Megan needed. Just smile, nod, and keep moving down the hallway. The boys were sprawled on Oscar's blue shag rug, assembling some kind of monstrous green Lego dinosaur. "Toby, your mum's here." "Aw," Toby whined. "Toby, come on please, sweetie." Janie took a tentative step into the house but stopped when Megan shot her a look. A vampire who knew she couldn't cross the threshold without an invitation. Megan pulled Oscar to his feet. "Come and say goodbye like a good host, please." Once, Megan would have asked Oscar if he wanted to come and say goodbye, but Lizzie had taught her that the less questions asked of young kids, the better. "You're the boss, not them," Lizzie said one day when she overheard Megan asking Oscar if he wanted to get off the swing and let someone else have a go. "Of course he's going to say no if you ask him. What kid wants to get off a swing and give someone else a go?" Oscar obediently put down a piece of claw and stood up, but Toby didn't move. "You can take the racing driver man home if you want," Oscar said. "Serious?" Toby immediately jumped to his feet. "Thanks, man." He bolted down the hallway towards his bewildered-looking mum, clutching a tiny Lego figure in his hand, eager to escape before Oscar changed his mind. "Oh, thank you." Toby's mum looked blindsided, as if her kid had never left anyone's house with so little fuss. Closing the door behind them, Megan turned to Oscar. 3 scoops of chocolate ice cream for you tonight." "But it isn't even Friday." Megan squeezed his cheeks together. "Let's live dangerously, huh?" She planted a kiss square on his puckered lips. "Mum!" Oscar wiped his mouth, smiling. "I'm too big to kiss now." "Is that right?" Megan reached out towards him again with zombie arms. Oscar squealed and turned to run, but Megan was too quick. She threw him down on the hallway runner and proceeded to cover his face with sloppy, loud kisses. Something was wrong. Megan lifted her eyes from her phone screen, saw 2 activewear mums she didn't know heading towards her, and quickly brought the phone to her ear. "Yeah, I'll have to have a look at our stock and see if we have enough for that order." Megan nodded, listened to no one, and kept her eyes fixed squarely on the grey asphalt at her feet. The 2 mums hesitated, then swerved away and walked in the opposite direction. Megan kept the phone to her ear, waiting until they were safely across the other side of the yard. She had zero interest in small talk, signing up for school events, or discussing her previous incarnation as the sleek briefs girl, a hugely successful ad campaign Megan had starred in at the age of 19. She hated that she was still recognised for that stupid ad. When Oscar had first started at Baytree Primary, a few parents had tried to talk to Megan about how their friend/brother/uncle/dad had a huge crush on her, but soon got the hint that the ex-model had zero interest in that or any other conversation and left her alone. Luckily, it wasn't hard keeping to yourself at Baytree Primary. Most mums and dads opted to dump their kids in the kiss-and-go zone, which was basically one step away from kidnap victims being kicked out of a moving car outside their house before their captors sped away, the passenger door still swinging wildly. So there were rarely more than a handful of grown-ups in the schoolyard on any given morning. Pretending to be on the phone again? Megan looked up to see Lizzie standing in front of her. Yep. Megan looked her up and down. You in your pyjama pants again? Having a fat day. Megan knew this wasn't Lizzie fishing for a compliment. Lizzie wasn't particularly crazy about her body, but she didn't make a big song and dance about it, believing there were far more important things to obsess about. As far as Megan was concerned, Lizzie had it all. Classic curves combined with an equally attractive self-confidence. Although apparently it had been so long since Lizzie had waxed her nether regions that Greg had started humming 70s porn bass lines whenever she got out of the shower. Luckily, according to Lizzie, Greg preferred the natural bushy look to the baby rodent look and was a 45-year-old horny teenager. But there was something slightly off about Lizzie this morning. Most people might assume it had something to do with her turning up to school in pyjama pants, but wearing half her sleepwear to drop off was a Lizzie Barrett special, especially on a fat day. Megan noticed that she kept looking around the schoolyard with a strange, unreadable expression on her face. She was about to ask if her friend was okay when Lizzie pointed to Megan's nether regions. How's the thrush? Yeah, better. Yogurt? Megan had no idea how someone who hadn't had sex in over a year had contracted thrush, but thanks to Lizzie's home remedy, fresh Greek yogurt on a pad, the yeasty curse was now a distant memory. So gross, but so good. Despite her limited experience with female friendship, Megan truly believed she'd struck gold with Lizzie, who was honest, funny, and possessed an unassuming natural air of authority, as well as the ability to not give a shit at all the right times about all the right things. Lizzie's zero bullshit vibe was what had first attracted Megan to her 2 years ago at the end-of-year kindergarten concert. In the spirit of political correctness, the kinder had abolished the traditional Christian nativity play, replacing it with an all-inclusive interfaith celebration, which were very de rigueur in Melbourne's inner suburbs. For someone who embraced the idea that every religion was as full of shit as the next, Megan found the whole spectacle hilarious. The kids had been asked to represent a variety of cultures, so there was a Vietnamese Jesus, a ginger Allah, a skinny Sri Lankan Buddha, and Oscar was the Hindu god Ganesha. Most parents were on board with this religious mishmash, and there were lots of approving expressions. Then Megan spotted a pretty mum standing at the back of the room with a look on her face that could only be described as bemused delight. The woman caught Megan's look and widened her eyes as if to say, "What the hell?" Megan widened her eyes back. As soon as the Christmas Chaos show was over, she headed outside and found the woman standing by a trestle table laden with cold sausage rolls and gluten-free mini muffins. "What a fucking dog's breakfast," she muttered to Megan. "I mean, I'm all for freedom of religion, but for fuck's sake. Which politically correct character belongs to you?" "Ganesha." Megan pointed to Oscar, who was filling his elephant head with sand. "Otherwise known as Oscar. Yours?" The woman pointed to a small boy who kept tripping over the long orange sheet draped around him as he tried to kick a soccer ball. "Max," she said, "one of the 3 wise Buddhas." "Amazing." Best Christmas concert ever. Lizzie smothered her sausage roll in sauce. I'm Lizzie. Megan was thrilled to learn that Lizzie was a Bay Tree primary parent and soon after that found herself with her first real female friend. Making friends had never been Megan's specialty. Half the girls at her all-female girls' grammar had been jealous of Megan's looks, and the other half misinterpreted her shyness for self-importance. When she was 9, Megan's mum, Ellie, had signed her beautiful daughter up with a modelling agency in an effort to distract herself from her own recent separation. Megan scored a few catalogue gigs and TV ads, which quickly led to a celebrity status at her school she'd never sought out. It got harder to make friends when Megan started senior school and was constantly being pulled out of class for casting calls and jobs. Her classmates made snide comments about Megan the model, and once Megan arrived at her locker to find a page of the catalogue ripped out and stuck to the front of it, her eyes blackened, a curly moustache above her lip, and a speech bubble saying, "Look at me, I'm a slut." Then there was Katya, the girl Megan had worked the modelling circuit with during her early 20s. The two of them spent hours hanging out in waiting rooms and dark, airless studios, doing long, boring shoots together, and Megan thought she'd finally found a real friend. She soon discovered it was a one-sided affair, as paper-thin as most of the models they worked alongside. Katya expected Megan to pander to her diva meltdowns, drive her all over town for castings, and lend her endless amounts of money that she never paid back. When a younger, hotter version of Megan appeared on the modelling scene, Katya dropped Megan like a carb-laden hotcake. Megan heard on the ex-model rumour mill years later that Katya had developed a cocaine habit, blew all her money, moved back in with her parents, and was working part-time as a checkout chick. When Megan enrolled Oscar at Bay Tree Primary, she'd sworn she wouldn't engage with anyone but Lizzie. In her experience, making friends was hard and painful, and the last thing she needed was nosy mums in the schoolyard asking why Bryce sometimes came to pick up with a man. Then Lizzie introduced Megan to Sam, and Megan felt, at the age of 35, as though she'd finally found her tribe. Lizzie now peered over Megan's shoulder. "Hey, what's happening on the gram?" No one calls it that. Yet. Never. "Good morning, ladies." Henry was leaning on the fence behind them, the lollipop stick in his hand and his huge dentures gleaming in the morning sun. Megan smiled politely. "Oh, hi." "How's it going?" Lizzie said, giving him a polite wave. They went to turn back around, but Henry was in the mood for a chat. "Lovely morning." He gestured to the blue sky. "They said it might rain later, but it's perfect now." "Yeah," Megan said shortly. "Anyway, have a good day." "You too, ladies." Henry grinned, tipping his wide-brimmed lollipop man hat at them. "Take care now." They turned back before Henry extended the chat any further. Oh, Jesus, he does not stop. Megan followed Lizzie's eyeline to the bike shed area where one of the school dads, Dave Podansky, was talking to a pretty schoolmum. At 40 years old, Dave still dressed like a university student. Megan had only met Dave a few times through Sam, but had quickly pegged him as an ageing nerd who'd managed to maintain a childlike enthusiasm for everyone and everything. The awkward dad had an unfortunate habit of planting his foot deep into his mouth, but there was something undeniably likeable about him. This is better than The Bachelor. And harder to watch. So, what are we staring at today with absolutely no discretion whatsoever? Sam stood at the end of the bench holding a tray of takeaway coffees. "Ooh!" Megan squealed. "Gimme!" They nodded towards the schoolyard bachelor action as Sam handed Megan her soy chai latte and Lizzie her flat white. Jesus, she's going to file an injunction or something. Sam plonked down on the end of the bench. Is Dave married? Megan asked. Yep, Lizzie said confidently, and I am extremely proud of myself for knowing that. How the hell do you know that? His kid was Zara's buddy last year, Lizzie said. She insisted on telling me every detail about his life. Ah. Which one's his kid? Sam asked. Jack. Which Jack? Asked Megan. Jack in 12C, Sam said. Megan rolled her eyes. There are 4 Jacks in 12C. No, that's 12D. There's only 3 Jacks in 12C. Oh, Jack B from 12D, Megan asked, squinting as she tried to picture Dave's son. 12C. Yeah, but which one? I think it's Jack D, Sam said. In 12C? Jack D from 12C. Oh my God. Lizzie threw up her hands. I'm going to stab you both in the face if you don't shut the fuck up. Some kids nearby playing Foursquare turned to stare at them and Megan pointed at Lizzie. So, what'd you make this morning? Lizzie asked Sam, waving at the kids apologetically. Before becoming a dad, Sam had been a sous chef at a fancy pants restaurant. These days, his culinary creations were limited to lunchboxes and home-cooked meals, but he still took immense pride in his cooking. The most creative Megan got was using tortillas instead of bread. Sourdough loaf with olives, feta and thyme, Sam said, and I got a beef rendang on the go in the crock pot before we left, so that's dinner sorted. Megan shook her head. Freak. Lizzie shrugged. I'm planning a Nando's feast for tonight's dinner. Did you think about what to bring for Careers Day? Megan asked, trying to sound as casual as possible. That would imply that we're going, Lizzie said. Oh, come on, please. Megan gave them both her best puppy dog eyes. Do it for Max and Tyler. She just had to convince them to go. Business hadn't been good lately, mid-year slump, and this was just the opportunity she'd been looking for. She needed this more than she wanted to admit out loud, but she didn't want to go on her own. As we've already established, your prime motivation is to drum up business, Sam said. What's in it for us? Lizzie rolled her eyes. Nothing, that's what. It was time to bring out the big guns. Tell you what, Megan said, if you both come, I'll bring coffees for the next month. Lizzie and Sam considered Megan's offer for a few seconds before looking at each other and nodding. You're on, Lizzie said. Shit. Sam and Lizzie followed Megan's eye line to the 2 activewear mums making their way back towards them. The 3 friends immediately lifted their phones to their ears and began simultaneous pretend conversations.
Sam. To Jack was here at hotmail.com from Sam Hatfield Chef at bigpond.com. Subject, FaceTime can suck the big one. Hey dickhead, thanks for the tip on the mini tarts for Careers Day, but I'm not sure Lola's teacher would approve the coffee liqueur. Caffeine, booze and 8-year-olds is a volatile combination at the best of times, let alone in a classroom. We don't want to cause a rebellion, at least not until high school. Not much else to report. Lola's reminding me more and more of Maggie Smith every day. Tyler's still headbutting. I'm thinking about enrolling him in one of those schools for the gifted. He was sitting cross-legged on the bathroom floor brushing his teeth last night and made the obvious choice to headbutt the door of the bathroom cabinet as a full stop to the toothbrushing. Split the door down the middle like he was the star attraction of a martial arts demonstration, a martial art where you're only allowed to use your head. I'm pretty sure those doors are solid oak. I didn't notice until this morning when I went in there to vacuum. I heard the sound of the impact last night, but I was just happy he'd brushed his teeth. And it didn't sound too big. Not like over the weekend when he headbutted that bronze statue in the entrance hall. You know the one Bridget shipped back from Italy? The nude woman wrapped around the nude dude and he's holding a really big fork or something and you can see the dimples above the nude woman's bum? Yeah, Tyler headbutted that as soon as he walked in the door from footy. They won, so no logic, as if I might still be searching for some. I winced at that one. It sounded like someone was announcing an emperor. He snaps oak and dents bronze. He might be Thor. So I took the broken door off and managed to seamlessly Tarzan grip the doors. There's no way Bridget will notice. Then, because I'd wiped down the doors of the sink cabinet, everything else looked dirty. So I worked outwards and wiped down the whole bathroom. I used enough Windex to power a small tractor. I also found what looked very much like a pube. Bridge and I don't use that bathroom, and Lola is 8. Say it ain't so. Bridget's in Malta, not Mauritius, but easy mistake to make, particularly for someone as geographically challenged as yourself. We organised a FaceTime with Bridge so the kids could say hi. I had to wake them up at 5:30 for a 5:45 call. The only thing I hate more than FaceTime is a ute with P-plates. The entirety of the call sounded like a bunch of sad, angry, tired people playing a weird version of Marco Polo. Mum? Sweetie? Can you hear me? Mum? Sam, is the Wi-Fi playing up? Mummy? Sweetie? Sam, just stay in one place for God's sake. Quality time. And look, I don't know what made you think I'd be the best person to give you advice about recreational drug use. As far as I'm concerned, it's not a drug. It's pot, and everyone should do it all the time. Kids should sprinkle it on their mini-tarts. World leaders should pass a pipe and fix the world, etc. If you feel like you should take a break, you're wrong. Go to your nearest bong shop and buy a 3-chamber Pyrex monster with a cone the size of a keep cup. I'm also available for free relationship advice. Hope you're okay, mate. You always fight the good fight, and your emails make me laugh. What I'm trying to say is your pain provides me with great mirth, so don't go finding a miracle cure. That'd be totes selfish. S. P.S. Stop asking me to send pics of Megan and Lizzie. They belong to me. P.P.S. When we text, you need to ease off on the GIFs. It's getting out of hand. This ends CD 1. CD 2.
Lizzie. You look like shit. Always a pleasure to see you two. What's going on? Aileen frowned and pointed a freckled finger at my face. Is it Greg? The kids? Has Nicole the admin bitch been at you again? I'll fecking slap her. A couple of people at other tables turned to stare at the loud Irish woman. Someone's going to report you. Aileen Doyle. Kind, loyal, generous, vile temper. She was the most popular midwife at the hospital, but also the most feared. Not by new mothers. They adored and trusted her with their lives, their babies, and their vaginas, but by other midwives and nurses. God forbid Aileen got wind of a midwife telling a labouring woman to keep it down a bit, or a nurse who gave a new mum grief for requesting uterus contraction pain meds. Aileen would track down the culprit, bail her up, and bawl the poor girl out for being an insensitive idiot. A few staff members had complained about Aileen Doyle over the years, but she was still working at St. Vincent's Hospital because she was damn good at her job. I was lucky enough to be her best mate, a title I wore like a badge of honour. We first met at college on orientation day 17 years ago, as the Bachelor of Midwifery course coordinator droned on about the correct use of a timetable. I heard an exasperated sigh. Jesus, is he feckin' serious? Behind me was a woman about my age with black wavy shoulder-length hair and alabaster skin, cradling her chin in white freckled hands, staring at the course coordinator in amazement. His name escapes me, so I'll call him Dweeby McDweebface. She saw me looking. I suspect your man there assumes our IQs are as low as the babies we'll be helping bring into the world, she whispered, while pointing at Dweeby. Over morning tea that day, Aileen told me she'd wanted to work with babies since she was a kid. Unlike me, she was on the hunt for an Aussie doctor to marry while she was at it. Or a male nurse. She shrugged. I'm not fussy like. We were inseparable in college and both landed jobs at St. Vinny's after graduating. Other than when we each took maternity leave and the time Aileen went back to Albury Wodonga to look after her mum for 6 months, we'd been working alongside each other for 14 years. Today was my half shift, so the two of us had ducked to the cafe across the road for a quick coffee before Aileen headed back to work. She narrowed her eyes at me. "What is it then?" "Don't think you can hide something from me." Obviously, I was hiding something from my best friend, but I just didn't have the energy for an Aileen apocalypse today. So I lied. "Feeling nervous about my long service leave?" Brilliant. Stroke of genius. "Nervous?" Aileen stuffed half a coffee scroll in her mouth. "You should be delighted. I'd give my left tit for another 10 weeks off. Both tits." Aileen had spent the majority of her long service leave lying on the couch and binging Netflix in her pyjamas. She'd drag herself off it long enough for basic household duties, but otherwise, Tim Tams and TV were her constant companions. Aileen's husband, Daniel, not a doctor alas, but an Italian plumber, eventually told her that if she didn't change out of her flannel PJs, he'd file for divorce on the grounds of passion fatigue. "I'm not the binge-watching type," I said. "I like being busy. I'll go mad at home on my own all day. I'm used to people and noise and feeling useful." Whoa, where had that come from? I thought I was looking forward to 10 weeks off, but there were obviously a few nagging doubts submerged in the shallow end of my subconscious. Looking after a husband, 4 kids and a dog, and working multiple 12-hour shifts a week forces you into a groove. If the music suddenly stops, you're probably going to fall over and smash your head on the kitchen floor. You've got ages to figure it out. Aileen crammed some almond croissant into her mouth. "Well, some of us have to go back to work. What are you up to on your Wednesday night off? Shagging?" "Auntie Carmen's birthday dinner." Just the thought of it was exhausting. "Say happy birthday from me," Aileen said, brushing buttery flakes from her fingers. "How old?" 68. Christ. Aileen shook her head as if the number was too big to comprehend. "We'll still be working here at 68 for our sins. And you and Greg will be those sickening pensioners who still hold hands and help each other in and out of the car." The invisible plectrum twanged my ribcage again. Would we be that couple? Or would Greg be long gone by then? Too horrified to have stayed married to a dirty liar. That night, the 6 of us piled into our second-hand Toyota Kluger to head over the bridge to Abella's, the restaurant my family had owned and run for almost 50 years. It was only a 20-minute drive from Ripponlea to Williamstown, but I may as well have been living in the Amazon as far as Dad was concerned. He'd never forgiven me for leaving the western suburbs to live in Melbourne's southeast with all those stuck-up bastards, even though he'd never known anyone from our side of town. Dad once saw a story on A Current Affair about some rich southeast suburban arsehole ripping off poor working-class second-generation immigrant Aussies and had made up his mind then and there. He wasn't too thrilled that I'd chosen midwifery over the family business either, but since my brother Joey stepped up a few years ago, I was officially off the hook. The Abella family restaurant was right next door to the Abella family home, the house I grew up in, and the house Dad and Auntie Carmen still lived in today. My grandparents helped Mum and Dad buy the rundown 3-bedroom red brick house soon after the young couple announced their engagement. The cafe next door had recently gone out of business, so my grandparents, ever the business-savvy wogs, forked out a few extra bucks to buy the cafe too. And we'd turn that shithole cafe into the best pastizzi bar and restaurant in the Southern Hemisphere. Modest fellow, my dad. But Abella's did develop a reputation among the local skips as the pretty little wog place that made the best pastizzis in the West. Dad painted the brick walls white and the window shutters red, replicating his favourite local restaurant back in Malta, and exposed wooden beams lined the ceiling. Wooden chairs and tables covered in the requisite red and white checked cloths scattered around the white tiled floor gave the place a warm, cosy atmosphere, and the walls were covered in framed black and white photos of Dad's family across generations. To my eternal shame, Dad refused to take down the photos of me as a metal-mouthed 12-year-old in a lilac velvet pantsuit. I resented Abellas as a kid and constantly dreamt of a different life, a better life. In my childhood fantasies, we lived in a white weatherboard house with native trees out the front, exactly like my best friend Melissa's house. Dad worked in a skyscraper in the city, which meant we only went to restaurants for special family occasions, not because I had to fold thousands of red napkins. Also, my mum was alive and baked scones, not pastizzis. It's embarrassing to think how ashamed I was of my family's business back then. As a slightly less bratty adult, I was now proud of Abellas and its legacy in the community, but that didn't mean I was in the mood for it tonight. As I pulled into a space across the road, we looked over to observe the scene playing out through the restaurant's front window, which was like an Old Testament painting of chaos and carnage come to life. My eldest brother, Chris, was swinging 3-year-old Marcus around by his feet as Rosa, his wife, waved her arms around, shouting at him from behind the counter. Dad was bellowing at Chris as Marcus's dad, my youngest brother Lucas, egged Chris on to go faster. The rest of Dad's 10 grandchildren were either kicking a soccer ball, chasing each other around the tables, or staring at their phones. Joey, my other brother, was carrying a tray of soft drinks that were in danger of being upended by one of the kids. Poor Dad sat in the midst of the chaos, looking like he was about to have a nervous breakdown. He loved his family, and he loved his restaurant, but the former was trashing the latter. Auntie Carmen and Lucas's wife, Shelley, were nowhere in sight, probably preparing tonight's birthday feast out back in the kitchen. As usual, we were the last to arrive. "I don't have the energy," I said. "What do you mean?" Greg said, undoing his belt. "Looks pretty low-key by Abella standards." "I've got a new teacher," Zara announced from the back seat apropos of nothing. "His name's Rick Cook and he's really cool and he said he knows you, Mum." My stomach plummeted into my black leather ankle boots. Rick knew I was a mum at the school. He must have seen me that day in the schoolyard. "Fuck, really?" I said, finding the contents of my handbag suddenly fascinating. "He said you were at the same soccer club when you were teenagers?" Zara had unclipped her belt and leant forward to stick her head between the seats. "I bet he was good. He looks as fit as Higgsy." This was high praise. With his floppy brown hair, chiselled jaw and athletic frame, Baytree Primary sports teacher, Rowan Higgsy Higgs, looked as if he belonged on the cover of GQ magazine or in the latest AFL draft. "No way he was as good as your mum," Greg said proudly. "Nanu reckons Mum could have played for the Matildas." "See?" Max bounced up and down like a deranged chimp, shaking the whole car. "Mum played soccer, so I should too." "I don't remember a Rick Cook," I repeated, staring into my bag, heart pounding. Why was I lying? Stupid. "He remembers you," Zara said. What would Zara think of her mother if she knew the truth? What would any of my kids think? "Course he does," Greg said, whacking me affectionately on the leg. "Your mum's a babe." "Don't say babe, Dad." Archie glanced up from his Spider-Man comic. "It's embarrassing for you and us." "Ugh," Stella groaned. "Nessa's wearing that faux fur jacket again." Thank you, judgmental daughter, for redirecting everyone's attention back to the restaurant, just as my heart was about to burst out of my chest alien style. "What a punish," Zara groaned. "I think it makes her look sophisticated," said Greg, ever the diplomat. "Are you serious?" Zara cried. "It makes her look like a wanker." Greg frowned. "Wait, I thought it was Scarlett we didn't like." My two daughters sighed with enough force to propel a hovercraft. "No, Dad, Scarlett used to be annoying, but she's better now," Stella explained. "Nessa's the annoying one." Greg glanced at me. "Can't keep up." "Maybe they think you two are annoying," I said. "Ever thought of that?" They were right, though. Joey's only child, 12-year-old Nessa, was a pretentious little shit, and the jacket did make her look like a wanker. "All right, manners, everyone," I said, hoping I didn't sound as shaky as I felt. "Max, bring the Lego tub for the little boys." A closed for private function sign hung askew off the large gold doorknob beneath the red Abellas sign, and the moment we opened the door, we were bombarded with a cacophony of voices. "Christopher, put him down!" Dad waved his hands in the air as if swatting at invisible bugs. "This is a place of business, not Luna Bloody Park." Chris set Marcus down, who immediately zigzagged towards the tub of Lego in Max's hands. "Here she is." Dad came over to grab my face between his hands and plant kisses on my cheeks. "My princess of the southeast. How's the weather over there?" "Same as here." My father was obsessed with the weather, tracking it, reading about it, and regularly announcing updates on it. "You look good, Dad." "Pah!" More hand-waving. "I look old. I'm old man now, Lizzie." "Bullshit," I said, kissing him on his scratchy, stubbled cheek. "You're only as old as you feel." At the age of 69, Dad's thick hair was still mostly black. He'd managed to stay trim, despite working in a restaurant that served some of the fattiest food going. It had only been a few weeks since I'd seen him, but I'd missed him, and suddenly wanted to be 5 years old again so I could lay my head on his chest and ask him to fix my problems the way he fixed my dolls when Christopher tore their heads off. "Sarah!" Chris's youngest daughter, Poppy, would have been desperate for her favourite cousin to arrive. "You're here!" The tiny girl torpedoed herself across the room and launched herself into Zara's arms. After hugging their nanu, Max and Archie disappeared under a nearby table with Marcus, while Alex, the cutest Abella at 14 months old, wriggled out of Stella's arms and tottered across the floor to join the big boys, as the rest of us spent the next 5 minutes greeting various members of the clan. I could feel my heart rate beginning to slow. My family was the perfect distraction from the Rick conversation in the car. Thank God we were here tonight and not around the dinner table at home. The only distraction there would have been Max's trick of blowing a pea out through his nostril. "Hey, little sis." Joey was only 1 year my senior, but had lorded that fact over me since we were kids. I noticed he looked tired as I hugged him. The poor thing had been married to psycho from hell Deanna, who'd finally left him 2 years ago for her personal trainer. Their daughter, Nessa, was following in her superficial mother's footsteps, but Joey adored her and spoiled her rotten, which was doing her no favours as a human being. "How you doing, Joey?" "We're all right," Joey said with a shrug. "Had to put up a fight to bring Nessa tonight. It's Deanna's week, but she eventually said yes." I glanced at Nessa, who was sitting in the far corner looking at her phone with her cousin Scarlett, and wanted to say he could have saved himself the bother since she didn't seem the least bit interested in being here. "Hey, girls." "Hey, Aunt Lizzie." They didn't even bother raising their eyes from their feeds, their faces tinted alien pale. I felt a thump on my arm and turned to find Chris grinning at me. 47 and still nailing the annoying big brother thing. "G'day, dickhead." We then proceeded to go through the traditional Lizzie/Chris greeting ritual. Chris gives Lizzie a hug so tight it borders on painful. Chris digs his fingers into Lizzie's armpits. Lizzie screams and pushes him away. Classic 40-something brother-sister stuff. Chris's black wavy hair, like Dad's, was speckled with grey and starting to thin out, and there were a few more wrinkles around his eyes. But other than that, he was still the robust Maltese man he'd transformed into at the age of 11. "You made it!" Rosa expertly navigated the throng, a fake smile plastered on her Botoxed face. We were worried you'd forgotten. Chris had also married a passive-aggressive pain in the ass. Wouldn't be much of a human if I forgot the birthday of the woman who raised me, I said cheerily. Rosa's left eye twitched and her smile flickered. I was only joking, she said, the mantra of the passive-aggressive. Where's the birthday girl? I asked Lucas, who managed a quick hug before running off to prevent Alex choking on a Lego brick. Kitchen, he shouted over his shoulder. Auntie Carmen stuck her head through the kitchen hatch. Shut the door, she yelled. The flies! My aunt was obsessed with flies and letting them in or out. Same went for air conditioning. It's July, Dad shouted back. Too cold for flies. Auntie Carmen walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a tea towel. Here's my faticatas, she said, holding her arms out. Auntie Carmen had called me her little cat ever since I can remember. Something to do with my independent streak and being light on my feet, apparently. Happy birthday, I said, wrapping my arms around her large body and kissing her on both cheeks. You're looking as beautiful as ever. Everything about Auntie Carmen was big. Her personality, her makeup, her voice, her colour scheme, and her body. Today, her short blonde spiky hair was wrapped in her trademark blue-green scarf, and a chunky multicoloured necklace dangled over the enormous breasts that had been the perfect pillow throughout my childhood. Her pink shift dress perfectly matched her bright pink eyeshadow, pink-rimmed glasses, purple stockings, and pink running shoes. In short, Carmen Abella resembled a diner waitress from the 1950s who'd been raised by drag queens. She grabbed my face. What's up your bum? What? Green-grey eyes flashed behind her pink glasses. What is it, huh? Nothing. I removed her hands from my cheeks. Just tired, getting my period. Still? Thought that well would have dried up by now. I'm 42. Could happen any day. She wagged a bejeweled finger at me. Don't believe those stupid magazines that say 40 is the new 30. Bullshit. Auntie Carmen! Stella cried from behind her where she was trying to wriggle out of Chris's headlock. Don't swear! Jesus, child, she cried. I'm 68 years old, for fuck's sake. If I want to swear, I'll bloody swear. Fuck! There, I did it again. Stella's mouth hung open and Chris laughed so hard that he loosened his hold on her. Now, come and give your Auntie Carmen a big birthday kiss. Stella pursed her lips defiantly, crossed her arms and sat on a bar stool. Auntie Carmen was over to her in a split second. She was very sprightly for a woman her age and covered Stella's face in sloppy kisses. Stella wriggled and screamed, then dissolved into giggles. Marcus crawled out from under the table. Me next, me next. Good to see the Abella tradition of death by physical affection was still going strong. In the days, months and years after Mum died, I received my fair share of sloppy kisses and hugs from the Maltese community. I was only 4, so it was a kind of torture, being forced to inhale various scents, ranging from mothballs to mustiness, from the men and women who played bocce with Dad every Saturday. These days, an uncle or aunt could be in danger of being chastised on the spot for unwanted physical contact towards a child. But I think that's bullshit. Kids are supposed to feel uncomfortable and awkward when fat Auntie Margaret with the moustache pulls you in for a big wet kiss on the cheek. Siblings should tease each other and fart on one another's heads. Life is awkward and uncomfortable. Okay, everyone, Rosa shouted over the noise. We can serve up now that the Barretts have finally arrived. Subtle. After we'd scoffed down our fair share of pastizzis, timpana, rabbit stew, and torta talicotta, Dad was on his feet. If only my Angela was here. Dad took out a crusty hanky to wipe the tear that appeared at the mention of Mum's name. It would make her so happy to see us all together, celebrating my big sister Carmen tonight. The kids weren't remotely affected by the mention of their long-dead grandmother. They'd heard the same speech from Dad at every family gathering since they could understand the spoken word. I squeezed Dad's hand to let him know that every Abella over the age of 14 was thinking about Mum too, even though I didn't remember her at all, to be honest. I have a faint memory of Mum showing me how to make pastizzis, but aside from that, it's a blur. We'd all heard the story of how Mum and Dad met. Joseph Abella and Angela Caruana were 17, fresh off the boat with their respective families when they headed to the Maltese Club one night. It was love at first sight. They danced all night and fell madly in love, so the story goes, and Angela had a ring on her finger within 6 weeks. Auntie Carmen says it was more like a year, but Dad never lets facts get in the way of his stories. They worked hard after they were married, but when the 4 of us came along, Mum gave up the long hours at Abella's, although she still made pastizzis in the home kitchen. Dad, however, spent 12 to 14 hours a day in the restaurant. Then Mum was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and 3 months later, she was gone. After 12 years with his beloved, Joseph Abella suddenly found himself alone and a single father to 4 young kids. He was a mess. If it wasn't for Auntie Carmen helping out at Abella's and at home, making sure we were all fed and washed on a daily basis, the 5 of us may well have ended up on the streets. Dad now turned to his life-saving sister and lifted his glass of Shiraz towards the wooden beams. "Everyone, raise a glass. To freedom," Stella sang at the top of her voice. Her current obsession was the Broadway musical Hamilton, which she quoted at every given opportunity. "No," Dad snapped. "To Carmen." "To Carmen," we all chorused. Thank you," Auntie Carmen said, sweeping her hands in front of her regally. "All hail the old cow for managing not to die for another year." "Pah!" Dad spat, covering a mortified Stella in tiny drops of spittle. "You will never die. God put you here to torment me all my days." "Ungrateful old bastard," Carmen said, grinning. "Crazy old bitch," Dad replied, grinning back. Ain't sibling love grand? "Auntie Carmen, we love you," I said, raising my 4th glass of House Merlot. Greg was driving. "Here's to another 68 years. Oh, please, God, no." She looked horrified at the thought. "Can we have cannoli now?" Chris's stomach was still his topmost priority at every family occasion. "Wait." Greg pushed his chair back and stood up. Every head whipped towards my husband, as though it were the first time he'd uttered a sound at an Abella family event, which probably wasn't that far from the truth. The poor man could hardly get a word in most of the time. What the fuck? Greg was going to give a speech? The man who'd rather saw off his own testicles with a blunt butter knife than bring attention to himself? And he was nervous, which meant that whatever this was must be important, especially if he was prepared to announce it in front of my family. "I wanted to say happy birthday to Auntie Carmen too," he began, nodding and raising his glass to her, "but also to acknowledge another special event today." "You finally got rid of the Toyota," Lucas shouted. "You're pregnant," Dad cried in delight. "Piss off," I said. "I am not." "Mum." "Sorry, Stella," I said. "Swear jar when we get home. Promise." "Excuse my wife's potty mouth," Greg said, "but actually, I know something Lizzie doesn't think I know." The tympana began making its way back up my throat. He'd found out about Rick and was going to make some weird kind of Poirot-esque announcement. I felt light and unstable, as if I might become two-dimensional and slip to the floor. I could tell by Auntie Carmen's expression that she had no clue what was going on. The Rick and Lizzie story was all ancient history as far as my family was concerned, and I had to stop Greg reminding everyone of the Abella's dark day. I touched his arm. Greg, how about we... On this night, 15 years ago, I met Lizzie Abella at a shithole. Dad! Sorry, Stella. Stella threw her hands up as if to say, can you believe this family? At a dubious Melbourne venue known as Inflation, Greg continued. Now, I'm not usually one for remembering dates, or deodorant, Archie mumbled beside me, so I thought I'd take the opportunity in front of her entire family to say, ha ha, I remembered and you didn't. Everyone cheered except Rosa, who looked as though she'd swallowed an unpitted olive. I grinned up at my beautiful idiot of a husband. He looked so handsome in his denim shirt and jeans with his freshly washed short blonde hair. As he rubbed his hand back and forth across his stubble, I felt as full of love for him as I was with relief that the subject of Rick Cook wouldn't come up tonight. Not tonight. Happy anniversary, Lizzie Barrett, Greg said, tipping his Asahi bottle towards me. You are the emotional rock and the beating heart of the Barrett family, the driving force behind us all, and we'd be lost without you. Oh, God. Why did he have to go and ruin a perfectly acceptable smart-ass moment with genuine love and affection? I blinked back tears as everyone roared their approval, apart from my brothers, who booed Greg's sentimentality. Greg leant down and pecked me on the cheek. Love you, buddy. Love you too. Stella held out a tissue. I'll let you both off the swear jar penalty because Dad was sweet and you got all weepy. Very generous, I said, taking the tissue and dabbing at my eyes. Right, now that the soppy Greg and Lizzie crap is over, can we have the cannoli? Yes, Christopher, Auntie Carmen sighed. Go bring it out. Chris ran for the kitchen and everyone resumed chatting, yelling and laughing. I stared at my husband, in awe of his unexpected display of bravery, honesty and love, and realised I was distinctly lacking in 2 out of those 3 right now. Megan. Megan parked her BMW in front of Applewood Retirement Village and took a deep breath. She hated this place, but this was where her mum, Ellie Wiley, had chosen to see out her remaining years, so here she came twice a week. Megan always hoped to find Ellie in her villa, but more often than not she could be found hanging out in the communal lounge area, social butterfly that she was. Ellie Wiley was 78, sharp as a tack, and still as politically incorrect as ever, and Megan adored her. She'd gotten used to having an older mum, even though it was harder when she was a kid. The kids at Megan's school often mistook Ellie for Megan's nana, and some of the nastier ones teased her about it. Megan was always fiercely defensive of her mother, but secretly felt embarrassed about how old her mum looked compared to the other kids' mums. Ellie was 39 and running a successful homewares business when she met Megan's father, Dean Wiley. One of her regular suppliers, Dean was very handsome and 10 years younger, but had assured Ellie the age gap wasn't a problem. They married not long after, and when Ellie became pregnant at the age of 42, she was ecstatic, having long accepted that her childbearing days were behind her. Megan's brother Matt was born 2 years later, and the Wiley family was complete. Megan and her mum had always been close, and it was just the 2 of them for the most part these days. Matt fell in love with a guy he met in a nightclub and moved to Sydney when he was 19. Although the relationship didn't last, Matt's love affair with Sydney had. Megan and her mum only saw him a couple of times a year, usually when he needed money or at Christmas when he needed a place to stay in between parties. And Megan's dad was long gone, having run off to Queensland with a woman half his age when Megan was 8. His departure hadn't had a huge impact on Megan's day-to-day existence, as he'd always been a distant, distracted father who was away for work a lot. And when Dean had been home, he was moody. Radios and TVs were turned off, and there were no games because Dad needs to work in peace. Megan's memories of her father were of him being an imposing figure, tall, bearded and broad-shouldered with huge, soft hands. He wasn't an affectionate man, and Megan couldn't remember ever seeing her parents hold hands or hug, let alone kiss. The most tender moment Megan ever shared with her father was the day he left. Dean sat her and Matt down on their brown leather sofa and informed them that he and Mummy didn't love each other anymore and that he was going away to give Mummy some space. 6-year-old Matt had one eye on the TV and hadn't heard the first part of their father's brief speech. He was thrilled. "Mummy's going to space?" "Do you still love us?" Megan had asked. Her father had put those huge hands on either side of her small face and nodded. "Of course, sweetie." She hadn't believed him, but saw the tears in his eyes as he leant forward to give her a hug, the most affection she'd ever received from this huge, quiet stranger who happened to be her dad. "I'll just be gone a little while." He gave Matt an awkward one-armed hug and walked out the door without looking back. A little while turned into 3 years. When he showed up unexpectedly at Megan's 12th birthday, gave her another awkward hug, said, "Happy birthday, sweetie," and left. Again. Megan hadn't seen him since. He'd tried to reach out once or twice when she was a teenager, but she'd refused to have anything to do with him. "He's your father, Megsy," Ellie had said at the time. "I don't want you to have regrets." "I won't, Mum," Megan said defiantly. "As far as I'm concerned, I only have one parent." Ellie was the one who'd given Megan the money to start Chill 5 years ago. One of the benefits of having a wealthy mum who'd had kids later in life, Megan had told Lizzie. Then, 2 years ago, Ellie had announced to her shocked children that she was selling the 5-bedroom family home they'd grown up in and moving into a swish local retirement village for a better social life. Ellie had never strayed very far from the affluent inner-city suburb where she'd raised her kids, so Megan wasn't surprised that she'd chosen the expensive Brighton retirement village Applewood over an apartment on the Gold Coast. This morning, Megan was walking across the manicured lawn heading for her mum's villa when she passed a group of dripping wet residents who'd just been for a swim. "Morning, lovely day," they chorused. "Yep," Megan said, averting her eyes from the stray pubic hairs escaping from one of the women's bathers and hurrying towards her mother's building. Another cheery male resident beamed at Megan as the lift doors opened. "Here to visit someone, are we, love?" "No, I'm here for a Tinder hookup." "Yes," Megan said, looking at her phone, hoping to cut the conversation short. "Who's that then?" "Ellie Wiley." "Oh, she's in the lounge, love," he said. "Just saw her." Bugger. The doors opened at her mother's floor and Megan stayed put, waiting for him to get out so she could head back down to the foyer. But he wasn't moving. "I'll take you there if you like." "I know where it is, thanks. Just get out." "Righto then." He tipped his flat cap at her and shuffled out. "Have a good day, love." Megan looked at the time. It was just after 11, so her mother was probably having morning tea with the Applewood gang. Great. More inane conversation was on the horizon. Megan crinkled her nose at the overpowering scent of lavender and must as she entered the spacious Applewood lounge. It was dotted with worn, bright yellow couches, low metal tables and plastic chairs. A large flat-screen TV in the corner played an episode of Home and Away. She spotted her mum and a group of residents at a table in the kitchenette on the far side of the brightly lit room. Megan recognised one or two of them but didn't know the others. Ellie was the opposite of her daughter and had built up quite the collection of friends since arriving at Applewood. People were drawn to the sprightly senior's forthright manner and biting humour. Ellie was never mean, but she could be shocking at times, like the time she introduced Megan to a fellow resident the day she moved in. "Joan and I went to school together," Ellie said, throwing her arm around the tiny elderly lady beside her. "She was a big-time judge back in her day." Joan had badly dyed black hair, large red designer frames with thick lenses, a matching red shirt and black tailored pants, reminding Megan of an oversized ladybird. "Joan used to tell everyone she hadn't seen a penis until she got married," Ellie said, winking at Megan. "But I was the witness at her shotgun marriage, so she's a damn liar." Horrified, Megan had been about to apologise to the ladybird woman when Joan giggled and swatted at Ellie's hand. "Oh, fuck off, Elle," she chortled. "They love it," Megan thought then. The oldies loved Ellie's naughtiness. They'd lived long enough to not give a shit about too much, and it took a lot to embarrass them. Her mother's mischievous nature was an asset at Applewood. "Megsy!" Ellie jumped to her feet and threw her arms around Megan. "Hello, love." Despite her age, Ellie was fighting fit thanks to her daily walks and swims. With her grey pixie cut, tanned skin and green eyes, inherited by both her children, Ellie resembled a twinkly-eyed elf from an Enid Blyton book and was considered a bit of a fox among the male contingent at Applewood. "Hey, Mum." Megan returned her mother's fierce embrace. Ellie gestured towards the woman and man at the end of the table. "You remember Helen and Bob?" "Hi." Megan wouldn't have been able to name them if she was being held at gunpoint. "And these old farts are Lucy, Carol and Bert." Ellie pointed to a frail bird-like woman to her left, a large woman wearing a floral dress opposite her, and a shrunken, bespectacled man. "Hello," Megan said. "Your mother never stops talking about you." The fatter woman threw her hands up and almost knocked a cup of tea out of the man's hand, startling him. "It's Megan this and Megan that 24/7. The others chuckled and nodded in agreement. "Bullshit," Ellie said. "She's exaggerating. It's 18.5 tops." "How have you been, dear?" Helen asked. "Good. Busy." "Oh yes, busy, busy," the fat lady said, nudging the man next to her. "Remember busy, Bert?" Bert let out an emphysemic chuckle, and Megan wondered if the poor man had uttered a single word in 50 years. "You were right about her being a beauty, Elle," the skinny woman said, looking Megan up and down as if she were a prize heifer. "You're gorgeous, dear." "Thank you." Megan cocked her head modestly. After years of receiving compliments, Megan had her response down to a fine art. "I bet the lads are lining up around the block for a date with you, eh?" Bob said, in a thick Scottish accent. "Beautiful lass like you." The dirty old perv gave her a salacious wink, and Megan had to hold back from throwing his milky, lukewarm tea in his face. "Dirty old perv," Ellie scolded, echoing her daughter's thoughts. "Keep it in your pants, Bob. She's 40 years younger than you." Bob grinned as the others tittered and chuckled. "And don't mention the word date around this one," Ellie continued. "Won't have a bar of men, will you?" "Gay, is she?" Helen perked up. "My granddaughter just climbed out too." "It's came out, Helen, not climbed," the fat lady corrected her and mimed what Megan could only assume was pushing doors of a closet wide open. Helen waved her hand dismissively. "Came, climbed, they're still out, aren't they?" "I'm not gay," Megan said quickly. "No, she's just fussy." Ellie agreed. My son's the gay one. Hey, Mum, can we go to your villa? Megan asked, before the gay conversation could continue. I need to put some Oscar dates on your calendar. Where is Oscar? Helen looked around as if the child might materialise behind her. He's so adorable. At school, you nitwit, Ellie cried. Where else would a 6-year-old boy be on a Thursday morning? At a board meeting? They all chuckled again. Honestly, Megan thought, with an audience like this, Mum could start her own Applewood comedy night. Come back and visit us again, love, Bob called out as Ellie and Megan began heading out of the room, earning himself a death stare from Helen. Our singing group performs next week, Lucy shouted. We'd love to see you there. I'll pass, thanks, Megan thought, throwing them a cursory wave. What was the big rush? Ellie asked as they stepped into the lift. I don't come here to see them, Mum. I come to see you. Still, might be nice next time. Megan followed Ellie into her one-bedroom villa. It was a nice apartment but could have been much nicer if Eleanor Wiley had a clue about decor. Although Ellie grew up with money and was wealthy throughout her adult life, there was no accounting for taste. From the floral patterned lounge suite to the zebra print rug, her mother's apartment was an explosion of clashing colour schemes, patterns and mismatched trinkets. A flat-screen TV and framed photos of Megan and her brother sat atop a bright blue TV unit in the corner of the room. A huge print of the 12 Apostles hung on the wall opposite. Knickknacks and souvenirs from Ellie's extensive travels cluttered the shelves of a tall glass display unit, and a Moroccan-style yellow and orange poof sullied the appearance of a Memphis velvet armchair that Megan had bought as a housewarming gift. Megan found it ironic that her mother had spent her entire working life running a business that specialised in making homes beautiful, yet her own taste was so bad. So, what's going on with Oscar? Ellie took her underwater dog's calendar off the wall and grabbed a biro from her yummy grandmummy mug. Megan flopped into the armchair. Nothing. Why? You said you had to give me some dates. Oh, that was just an excuse. Oh, Ellie said, frowning. Right. So, you well? Fine. How's my beautiful boy? Ellie took a packet of biscuits from the cupboard and laid them out on a plate. Still playing footy? Yeah, Bryce is picking him up for training tonight. Megan took out her phone to tap in a reminder to make sure Bryce had ordered Oscar's new footy shorts. Ellie held out the biscuits. And how are you two getting along these days? Fine. Why? Megan asked, taking a Monte Carlo. Oh, just asking, Ellie said, sitting on the couch and pulling her legs up under her. Is he still with that man? His name's Adam, Mum. Megan slow blinked. You know that. Rather not say it. Ellie crossed her arms like a stubborn child. He's the reason my grandson's parents aren't together. If it hadn't been Adam, it would have been someone else, Megan said, with Bryce being gay and all. Oh, doesn't it make you want to meet someone? Ellie asked, seeing the happy couple. Megan smiled at her mother's attempt at air quotes, which looked like she was pulling handgun triggers. I'm not interested in a relationship, Megan said. I'm happy on my own. She meant it too. She'd done the Tinder thing, been on a few dates, had a few shags, but no one came close to anything. Megan had once told Lizzie that she might like to be a nun. Those chicks are never alone, Megan had said, always walking around in pairs. It might not be too bad. Do the obligatory prayer thing a few times a day, hang out, talk about how ace Jesus was, and spend the rest of the time in my cell on Insta. Lizzie winked. And how hard would you rock that habit? Harder than Whoopi, Megan replied. She'd been joking about the nun thing, but was dead serious about not wanting a relationship. What about when you're older and Oscar's moved out? Ellie asked. I'll be dead and you won't have anybody. Cheery thought, Mum. Megan raised her half-eaten biscuit in salute. Thanks. Megan glanced down as her phone lit up with a stream of Instagram notifications. She'd posted an 80s Atari joystick t-shirt that morning, and it was getting a lot of love from her 42,000 chill followers. Actually, I wanted to ask you a favour, Ellie said, brushing biscuit crumbs off her grey leggings. Megan said, staring at her screen. Helen's son is moving back from Adelaide and needs to find a school for his kids, Ellie said. I said maybe you'd talk to him and his wife about Bay Tree Primary. I'm not really the best person to ask, Mum. Ellie frowned. Oscar goes there, doesn't he? Megan sighed. I'm busy, Mum. It wouldn't take much time to just... Shit! An email from a Bohemian Beach label popped up on her screen, demanding that all orders be in ASAP or she'd miss out on this season's collection, which was the last thing she needed this month. Damn it! What? An order I need to put in or I'm screwed, Megan said, standing up. Sorry, Mum, gotta go. But I didn't even tell you about Harriet and the bus trip, Ellie cried. People kept asking for unscheduled toilet stops, which made us 10 minutes late to the gardens, and Harriet suggested everyone wear pads on the next trip, so Susie told her she could stick her pad up her... Save it for next week, Megan said, heading for the door. You know I love a Harriet story. Come for dinner Monday night, okay? The flat-capped old guy from earlier was waiting outside the lift, staring in Megan's direction, a lewd grin straining to lift the sagging skin on his face. Had he spent this entire time riding the lifts, or had he just been hovering in the hallway waiting for Megan to come back? She considered retreating to the safety of Ellie's room, but knew she had to get past this libidinous senior citizen eventually. He had nowhere else to be. Why the rush, love? Places to be and all that, I suppose. Megan jabbed at the lift button, then turned to address the flirty fossil. Yeah, my girlfriend just called, Megan said sweetly. She's really horny, so I'm off to her place for some serious sex. The lift doors opened nearly as wide as the old dude's mouth as Megan stepped inside. As the doors closed, she threw the dumbstruck man a final friendly wave. Dad's here! Oscar almost knocked the laptop out of Megan's hands as he jumped from the couch to the window ledge. Oscar! She cried. Careful! She'd spent the last 2 hours madly trying to get her orders into the beach label, breaking her no TV after school rule, but Oscar had incessantly nagged her to get off your computer. So she'd finally compromised by doing her work beside him on the couch while he watched the Lego movie for the 100th time. Oscar leapt off the couch and yanked the door open for Bryce, whose hand was poised like E.T., ready to ring the bell. Dad! Oscar leapt into his father's arms. Megan closed the computer and stood up, feeling that familiar flutter in her belly as she watched her ex-husband's muscular arms encircle her son's small body and lift him up. As per usual, Bryce had achieved his I look totally stylish and gorgeous without making an effort look, in blue jeans and a white t-shirt that showed off his pecs. Hey, dude, Bryce said, ready for training. Bryce and Adam had enrolled Oscar in the local under-7s football team at the start of the year, and despite Megan's initial reservations about her baby playing such a rough sport, it had been great. Oscar looked adorable in his white shorts and blue and white striped Guernsey, and even though Megan knew nothing about the game, she enjoyed watching him running around the oval, chasing and tumbling and kicking. Bryce took him to training and they both attended the games, Bryce with Adam and Megan with Ellie. They never sat together, of course. Yeah, Oscar cried. Are you going to watch me? You bet, Bryce said, lowering Oscar back to the floor. No phone, okay? Bryce put his hand on his heart. No phone. Oscar's footy games were the only times Megan wouldn't dare touch her phone. Her son constantly checked to make sure she was watching and still talked about the time she'd made the mistake of replying to an email during a game and had missed him kicking a goal. He'd refused to speak to her in the car, and for a full hour once they got home. A new record. "Let's go," Oscar said, tugging on Bryce's hand. "Bye, Mum. See you after." "Hold your horses, mate," Bryce said. "Got to talk to your mum. You go hop in the car." "But I don't want to be late. And the coach—" "We won't be late. Promise." Oscar didn't look convinced, but ran off to jump in the back seat of Bryce's brand new Jeep Wrangler, a ridiculous car for a man who'd never been off-road in his life. The closest Megan's ex-husband had ever come to camping was once when they were first married and he'd fallen asleep at sunset in a hammock in their backyard. "What's up?" Megan assumed Bryce wanted her to have Oscar over the coming weekend because he and Adam were off on one of their weekend Hobart trips. Apparently the pretty town was one of the hippest places to visit these days, and Bryce loved telling anyone who would listen about the Mona pavilions and how the experience was always so spiritually enriching. Well, he said, fidgeting with his car keys, "I have some news." "Right." Megan felt a shiver on the back of her neck. There was no way this was good news, not for her anyway. "Adam proposed and I said yes." "You're getting married?" Her heart was thumping so hard she was sure Bryce would notice it through her jumper. "Yeah," Bryce said, with a sheepish grin. "You're invited, of course." Megan slapped a hand to her heart in mock gratitude. "Thank you for thinking of me." "Megs, I didn't want this to turn into a thing. Congratulations," she said, cutting him off before he said anything else or before she broke down in front of him. "You'd better go. Oscar's about to melt down." Megan could see Oscar's face pressed up against the car window, and he was frantically pointing at his Star Wars watch. "Can we just—" But Megan had already stepped back inside and closed the door. She heard the car start up and drive away, and that's when she finally allowed the tears to fall. Fucking Bryce. Fucking Adam. She swiped angrily at the traitorous tears on her cheeks, took a deep breath and looked at her phone. She had an hour before Oscar got back. More than enough time to go pay Michael a visit at the bottle shop. Michael, a 50-something man who lived in flannel shirts tucked into his jeans, always wore an expression of intense interest as Megan described what she was in the mood to imbibe, as if she were telling him something crucial and urgent. He'd listen and nod, bouncing the knuckle of his hairy forefinger off his lips as his eyes scanned the shelves, and she was always grateful for the attention he paid her. Once, when Lizzie and Sam had asked her what she'd done on the weekend, Megan had responded, "Oh, not much. Caught up with my friend, Michael. Bottle of wine. It was nice." If Megan had to fill in an emergency contact on a school form, Michael would be on her shortlist. The way things were looking, she should probably get his contact details.
Sam. To Jack was here at hotmail.com from Sam Hatfield Chef at bigpond.com. Subject, an incident at the market. Oh, mate. I just made a monumental dick of myself. I'm sitting in the car sweating. I was at the market. I'm making those mini tarts for Lola's class, scrutinising the raspberries because I cared deeply about my mini tarts, when I think I hear someone talking to me, except I assume they're not because I'm at the market and I'm blocking out the existence of other humans. But this woman is next to me, pointing at my raspberries saying, "You going to interrogate those berries?" So straight away I'm thinking, that's a line. This woman's trying to pick me up at the market. Of course, it doesn't occur to me that I haven't been on the singles scene for eons, and how the hell would I know if it was a pickup line? So, as if to prove just how rusty I am, I respond, "Well, these berries have been seen loitering around my daughter's primary school, so I'm going to let them know what's what." I made the raspberries into pedophiles. But wait, there's more. This woman's response to my response was to stare and smile strangely, So I decide to keep talking. Yeah, I'm thinking some basic waterboarding and sleep deprivation until I break them. I'm planning to torture pedophile berries now. Then she says, you could always threaten them with a NutriBullet. She's on board with the berry torture, which makes me laugh really loudly. It got a fair bit of attention. The Vietnamese woman who runs my favourite fruit stall looked over and shook her head. But Sassy Pants throws me a bone because she's nice. I would have walked away from me by this point. What school does your daughter go to? Baytree. Then something struck me. I'm wearing Ugg boots, my mankiest trackies, and a t-shirt Lola got me last year that says, bad puns, that's how I roll. EYE. Abort. So I say I better get home and make a start on these mini tarts. But then I start this ramble about not being against plus-size tarts, and I embrace tarts of all sizes. The last thing she said was, okay, well, maybe I'll see you around. And what did I say, Jack? What was my parting conversational gift? I know you know, but I will type the words so you can confirm that I'm a bigger dickhead than even you. Her. Okay, well, maybe I'll see you around. Me. Not if I see you first. I just headbutted the steering wheel upon reliving that. Her name was Sasha, and I saw her head over to the second-hand bookstall and walk behind the counter, so now I know where she works. But I don't even know if I told her my name. That was bad. I mean, I hope my haplessness is giving you some joy, but man, with the benefit of a few minutes hindsight, that was humiliating. Should I go back? Say it had been a weird morning and I was in shopping mode or something. It's the sort of thing I should tell Bridge, but there'd be the whole explaining about why I was talking to some woman at the market, and I'd say she started talking to me and Bridge would say something like, I'm sure she did, and then we'd fight. So I'm telling you instead. My other wife. Got to get home now. Thanks for listening, dickhead. Speak soon. S. X.
I've called twice now, but nobody's home. Their machine isn't even on. I really wanted to hear her voice right now, but she might still be at training. Dad's off his face and just told me he's glad Mum's dead because I'd drive her fucking insane if she was still around. If Mum was still around, she'd break his nose with a crock-pot and tell him to get the fuck away from me. The crock-pot hasn't been touched since she died. Should probably dust it off and put it to good use, but he's not worth it. She strokes my hair and says, he's not worth it. He's not even worth your time. Then she says she loves me, and then nothing that drunk fuckwit says matters in the slightest. It's like she clicks her fingers or waves her wand, or however she makes her magic happen, and makes me know, with such fierce certainty, that everything's going to be okay. Because we have each other, and we're always going to be together, and nothing is stronger than us. I'll just sit in my room and leave my chest of drawers up against the door until Dad runs out of steam. He's still yelling, but I can't tell what now. The words fucking useless pop up a lot. I can't wait to take my love away, as far away from Dad and all this shit as possible, and then it will be just us. Dad's banging on my door now, but he's wobbly. He won't get through tonight. He'll punch the door too hard and swear and then go back to the lounge and fall asleep in front of Halifax FP. Maybe I'll go and find that crock-pot when he does.
Lizzie. I yawned and Megan recoiled. Jesus, you could eat an antelope with that mouth. Oh, sorry, early morning. I'd been up since 5:30 a.m, thanks to Zara's pre-dawn meltdown about an unfinished science project that was, of course, due today. No better way to start the day than working out how to take cotton balls and a piece of raffia and making a respectable molecular model. After that crisis, I had to deal with the fallout from Max's I'll make my own breakfast adventure, and in the midst of that clean-up, the great hunt for Archie's hat began. We discovered it under the barbecue just as Max started on at me about Careers Day. "Did you remember it's today?" he asked, looking both hopeful and panicked. "What work things are you going to bring?" I was all over it. I'd hit up George, the theatre tech, for forceps and an amni hook at my last shift, both of which were in my bag, ready for their close-up. Once Max was satisfied his mother wasn't the worst parent at the school, today, I made 4 lunches, stacked the dishwasher, fed the dog, put a load of washing on, told each child in the house to put their shoes on 8 times each, got myself dressed, and the whole lot of us out the door by 8:30am. Greg left for work at 6am every day, so was spared the morning chaos. Lucky bastard. Apart from the early mornings, I wasn't sleeping particularly well either. Tomorrow would be a week since I'd spotted Rick, right here in this schoolyard, and yet I had done precisely nothing about finishing the letter to Greg and giving it to him. Thank God he was flat out with work this week. Greg usually did school pickup on Mondays, but I'd kindly offered to do it today. The look of gratitude on his face was enough to make me feel like even more of a duplicitous cow than I already did. The time bomb ticking over my head was getting louder with every minute that passed. Lost someone, Lizzie? Sam approached us, holding a Tupperware container. What? You look like a meerkat on the lookout for a pack of jackals. Shit, was I that obvious? Just checking if Archie found his bike helmet. That's a lovely pink container you have there, Sam, Megan said. Tarts, Sam said. Rude, Megan said. No, Sam said, holding up the container. Raspberry tarts for the bring something into class to show what your parents do thingy. Careers Day, Megan asked, still looking at her phone. That's snappier, Sam said, gesturing at us to make room for him on the bench. Are you pretending you're a chef? I bumped Megan's hip with mine, shuffling her along, and tried to get into drop-off banter mode rather than scanning the yard like a possessed meerkat. I am a chef. Was a chef, Megan corrected, glancing up from her morning Instafix. You used to work at Attica. The only difference between now and then is that I don't get paid to cook anymore, Sam argued, plonking down on the bench. Give us a look then. I reached over and peeled back the corner of Sam's Tupperware lid to reveal at least a dozen picture-perfect tarts, topped with fresh cream and plump, juicy raspberries. We should check them. Megan's hand was stretching towards the tub. For nuts, I added, slipping my fingers under the lid. Back away from the tarts. Sam snapped the lid down, almost catching my fingers. What did you bring, Lizzie? Megan and Sam recoiled as I brought out my show-and-tell items. What the hell, Lizzie? Megan squealed. It's forceps and an amni hook. I know all too well what they are, Megan said. Why would you bring them here? Lizzie, Sam said, I'm shaking. How do you think kids will react? They need to know. Know what? Megan asked. That they were dragged into the world with a pair of horror movie tongs? Even before becoming a parent, I was never one who believed in sheltering kids from reality. Apart from the requisite Santa Claus and Tooth Fairy ruses, I've always tried to answer my kids' questions as honestly as possible. Max once heard 2 teenagers oversharing in a cafe and asked me at full volume, Mum, what's anal? So I told him. I waited until we were in the car, but I told him. Why couldn't you have brought, I don't know, a teddy bear or a blankie or something? I don't work in the dementia ward, Megs, I replied. I work in the part of the hospital that drags miracles into the world with horror movie tongs. What'd you bring? Megan reached into her Burberry bag and produced a fluffy kid-sized jacket that looked like it had been made at the cost of many Ewoks and a small skateboard emblazoned with SpongeBob SquarePants artwork. Fuck off, I scoffed in disgust. What? Megan blinked. It's my job. It was apparent to all of us that Megan was already the undisputed winner of Careers Day. I'll give you 3 tarts if you go home, Sam begged. Please. Sometimes I couldn't help feeling jealous of Megan's life. She looked unreasonably good at unreasonable hours, had an effortless style and sophistication I'd never possessed, and had 2 nights a week and every second weekend to herself. But deep down, I knew that I wouldn't trade my crazy Barrett bunch or tracky dacks for all the Burberry bags and sleep-ins in the world. A man laughed behind us and my stomach contracted. I glanced around nervously to see a school dad talking to his kid. Not Rick. Jesus, this was stressful. I felt like a criminal waiting for a crack team of Ricks to abseil down from Black Hawk helicopters and bundle me into a windowless van. "So, Sammy, big day coming up," Megan said. Sam didn't answer. He was in denial about turning 40 next week, so of course we made sure to raise the topic as often as possible. "You going to have a party?" I asked. "Yeah, where are our invites?" Megan said, nudging him. "No party," Sam said. "Too much hassle." "Maybe Bridget has organised something." "Doubt it," Sam said. "She's been in Seattle for 2 weeks, doesn't get back till tomorrow night. She's flat out on this new project, so..." His voice trailed off. Banter between the 3 of us flowed easily at school drop-off, but it always hit a block whenever Bridget came up. We could usually tell when she'd arrived home from a work trip, as Sam was a lot quieter than his usually blithe self. He even looked smaller. The school bell rang, reinforcing its reputation as the unwitting saviour. "All righty," I said with forced cheeriness. "Let's go." 5 minutes later, the 3 of us were squeezed into small blue plastic chairs at the back of the classroom as grade 1 and 2 kids spilled noisily into the room and sat cross-legged on the carpet in front of us. There were only 5 other parents in the room. "Huge turnout," Sam muttered. "So much for Penny Guthrie's please make an effort to attend email," I whispered back. Max was sitting in the front row, nerd, and turned around to give me an enthusiastic wave. I grinned and waved back. Poor kid. Having his mum attend a class event could possibly rank among one of the best days of his short life. Mr. Heine and Mrs. Godfrey stood at the front of the classroom talking softly to each other, using their faces to keep some of the naughtier kids in line. All eyes, eyebrows and jutted chins. Penny Guthrie sat to the side of the room in front of a poster that read, "We love our local community." "Hey gang." Dave appeared beside us, a sheen of sweat covering his brow. "Made it." Dave looked genuinely excited to be here as he pulled up a blue plastic chair. "I'm showing some early sketches from my graphic novel. What about you, Megan? What did you bring?" "Wait a few minutes and you'll find out," Megan said, not looking up from her phone. "Wouldn't want to ruin the surprise." "Oh, yeah, right." Dave wasn't technically part of our gang, but we tolerated him in the same way you'd tolerate a puppy who is sweet but who also chews your shoes and pisses on the rug. "Hey, I've got some invites for you guys," Dave said. "It's the launch of my graphic novel." "Cool." Sam couldn't have sounded less interested. Megan, still engrossed in her newsfeed, didn't answer him at all. "Hands on top," Mrs. Godfrey shouted over the din. "That means stop," the kids chanted, placing their hands on their heads. Mr. Heine stepped forward, reminding me of Hector the cat in his orange and dark blue striped polo shirt. "Thank you, 1s and 2s. Sam stifled a giggle. 40 going on 14. "Before we get started with Careers Day," Mr. Heine continued, "Miss Guthrie has a quick announcement for the grown-ups." Penny stood up and stepped forward. "Firstly, welcome to Term 3, she began, looking pointedly at us 7 adults up the back. "We have some very special events planned for the remainder of the year and really need your support and help to make them as good as they can be." As school communities went, Baytree primary parents were lazy and useless. Most of us didn't volunteer at the school, myself included. We were busy 21st century mums and dads with zero interest in point scoring over who spent the most hours manning the barbecue or who made the best brownies for the fete. Most of us had little to no awareness of school events, and apparently not a single parent had showed up for the working bee last year. We were lucky to know our kids' teachers' names, let alone when or where the annual Art Attack night was held. Our most exciting event is the end-of-year Christmas concert, Penny continued. This year we will have 2 concerts over 2 separate nights. One is to be performed by the Prep to Grade 4 students and the other by Grades 5 and 6. Our drama teacher, Miss Mitchell, has her hands full, so it would be great if we could have some parents helping out with the planning and execution of the junior school concert. Execution? Who used a word like that talking about a school concert? This is a very important event for your children, Penny said deliberately, and any assistance at all that we can get from within our school community would be greatly appreciated. Her steely blue eyes bored into us, sending a clear message. Lift your game, get involved, or she'd hunt us down one by one. I glanced over to see if Megan and Sam were as amused by these thinly veiled threats as I was. Sam looked paralysed with fear, but Megan was on her phone and obviously hadn't heard a word. So, do any parents here think they could get involved with the junior school concert? Megan was still swiping, tapping. She's asking if any parents here have over 30,000 Instagram followers, I whispered in her ear. Megan's head shot up and she waved her hand in the air. Oh, I do. Penny, probably resigned to the fact that no one would volunteer, couldn't have looked more shocked if Megan had just confessed to murder. Well, that's excellent. Penny reverted back to her self-assured tone. Thank you, Megan. I'm sure Oscar will be thrilled to have his mum helping out with the concert. It took Megan about 1.2 seconds to realise she'd been well and truly hoodwinked, and her expression changed to one of distress. Oh, I can't. Oscar, beaming, gave his mum the thumbs up, and Megan had no choice but to return it with a forced smile. And there it was. With that single gesture, Megan had promised her son, his friends, the teachers and the principal that she'd help out on a school event. I couldn't have been happier with my work. Apparently dobbing your mate in for something you wouldn't want to do in a million years felt pretty damn good and was a great distraction from your own tangled web of deceit. As Penny handed back over to the teachers, Megan's head rotated towards me, the smile frozen on her face. What the fuck? She growled. You're an inspiration to the parents of Baytree, I said, patting her perfect thigh. Your community thanks you. You are dead. Should have been paying attention, I said with a shrug. You snooze, you lose. Sam's shoulders shook with silent laughter and Megan gave him his second violent nudge for the morning. What did I do? Sam demanded. Probably put her up to it, Megan muttered. Assholes. Dave, Miss Godfrey said, could you come up and tell us about your work as a graphic artist? Love to. Dave jumped out of his seat and headed to the front of the class, surveying his audience as if he were about to reveal the secrets of a new Star Wars movie. I have here some sketches from my early work on my forthcoming graphic novel, codename Code. The children gazed at Dave with vacant expressions as he plugged his laptop into the electronic whiteboard. A pencil-drawn image of a man trying desperately to climb out from inside a computer monitor appeared, and the kids oohed and ahed. Could this day get any worse? Megan muttered. I grinned, even as I was thinking that it could definitely get much worse, for me anyway. especially if Rick was roaming the school corridors when I left Max's classroom. As Dave banged on about the vagaries of ink technology, I thought about how I'd need to be on constant alert from now on if I wanted to keep hanging out with my mates at drop-off, at least until I'd given Greg that damn letter. Careers Day was a huge success. Sam's tarts were devoured by the entire class, although he was visibly distraught when most kids shoved the tarts into their mouths without taking the time to appreciate the textures and balance of flavours. Megan wowed the kids with her affordable designer children's wear and accessories and then handed out Chill business cards. "Give these to Mum and Dad and make sure you tell them how much you love Chill's clothes," she said. "And these cards are magnets too, so you can just whack them on the fridge." She flicked one from her hand and it stuck smack in the middle of the interactive whiteboard. The kids applauded. The teachers scowled. My forceps and amni hook demonstration on the classroom doll Trixie went down a treat. Lots of squeals and eye covering and even a few tears. Kids love that gory shit. Max couldn't have been prouder. Despite my performance high, I still felt jumpy as we walked out of the classroom. Down any corridor, around any corner, from any door, Rick might appear. "I'm going to go this way," I said, gesturing towards the door at the far end of the corridor, furthest from the classrooms. Sam frowned. "The long way?" "She wants to get as far away from me as possible." Megan's eyes glinted dangerously. "Because I'm going to kill her." "Too many witnesses," I called, walking away. "This isn't over," I heard Megan call as I walked out into the cold.
This ends CD2. CD3. Sam. To Jack was here at hotmail.com from Sam Hatfield Chef at bigpond.com. Subject: You asked for it. Hiya, Jack. I love that you always want to find the fix. That's why you were such a great drummer. Just wanted to serve the song. But my marriage ain't a song. If it was, it'd be unlistenable. I understand that my marriage is a broken thing. Not like a porcelain mug that falls a short distance and breaks into two perfect pieces. You pick up the two perfect pieces and they fit together so well that you can just carefully place the broken thing back on the shelf, safe in the knowledge that nobody else will reach for it and discover that it's now unusable. To everyone else, it still looks like a perfectly good mug. My marriage didn't break like that. My marriage broke like one of those bog-standard latte glasses found all around Melbourne, before our coffee was served to us in recycled Vegemite jars or petrified passion fruit shells. I've made my share of coffees for Melbourne's heaving masses. I've seen how those latte glasses break. They explode, and the tiny crystal hailstones somehow cover about a 300-metre radius. It's quite spectacular, but the clean-up's a bitch. No combination of broom and vacuum will find all the pieces. The explosion is too violent, almost cosmic. Every inspirational video on the interwebs tells the story of a bad situation, followed by a realisation, followed by some royalty-free inspirational music, followed by some footage of the ocean and hands clasping and graduation hats being thrown in the air and a boxer skipping, and suddenly, within the 104 seconds it took for the music to swell to its climax, what started as a realisation has ended as a better life. Your best life. Suck a bag of dicks. The understanding is a culmination of years of experiences, both colossal and minuscule. The understanding is a culmination of years of experiences, both colossal and minuscule. The realisation can be nothing more than some casually raised eyebrows and a small nod for no one's benefit but your own. The realisation isn't the thing to be reckoned with. The understanding is the dragon. I think folks assume that having the understanding that something is over leads to epiphanies, action, and enlightenment. Not for me. I've understood where me and Bridge have been for years, but it hasn't spurred me on to make a seismic shift. It's paralysing. Sorry. And I'm glad. I won't run away from my kids. They are everything. Sorry to get all thingy, but without those kids, I don't know how or why I'd get up in the morning. So, I'll happily stay in this Arctic marriage if it means I get to see my kids every day. Love you, mate. Thanks again for going all Dr. Phil, but our marriage doesn't need a doctor. It needs a coroner. S. X.
Megan. Mum! Oscar pulled Megan along the street towards the school gate. We're so late! Sleeping in on a weekday was a rare occurrence, but Megan had stayed up late answering emails and ordering new chill stock the night before, finally falling into bed sometime after 2 a.m. She woke to a sleepy-eyed Oscar standing beside her bed, holding her phone up to her face. "Mummy," he'd whispered, "I think it's late." Megan scanned the schoolyard as they hurried along the footpath, but Lizzie and Sam were gone and would be furious at missing out on their morning coffees, as per Megan's Careers Day deal. "Mum, they're all in assembly," Oscar said, tugging on Megan's arm in alarm and pointing at the school hall. "I'm late for Monday assembly." Megan could hear the students' off-key warbling of the national anthem coming from the hall, which meant Penny Guthrie wasn't in her office. Which meant Megan would have to wait until after assembly to tell her, "So sorry, but I can't help with the concert after all." Damn it. Sometime after midnight and before 2 a.m, Megan had decided there was just no way she could help out on the stupid school play. She was a single working mother and things were tight right now. Penny would have to find some other sap to source costumes and paint sets. "Go on then," Megan said, leaning down to give Oscar a kiss. "Aren't you coming?" Oscar's face fell. "Parents are invited too." It was hard to say no when Oscar had a look of such pathetic hope on his face and knew she had nowhere to be that morning. "Okay," she said, turning towards the hall. "Come on." Megan couldn't remember the last time she was inside the Bay Tree Primary School hall. Probably last year's Christmas concert, when Oscar's class had sung "Santa Wear Your Shorts," dressed in Aussie cork hats. The hall was a decent size for a small school, with an inbuilt stage at the far end. It even had a small kitchen where the older kids had served parents pre-show gingerbread biscuits. Megan looked over to see Penny Guthrie on the stage, addressing the 240 or so students sitting cross-legged on the parquet floor. The crackly microphone was attached to a small amp that looked as if it belonged in the corner of a 13-year-old boy's room. Black metal folding chairs were set up behind the children, and Oscar joined his classmates as Megan quietly slipped into one of the many vacant chairs. Standard poor parent attendance at a Bay Tree assembly. And I know we will all miss Henry's smiling face as he greeted us every day, just as he's done every morning for the past 15 years, Penny Guthrie was saying. But we can feel comforted in the knowledge that he lived a long, happy life. Megan noticed some of the older students crying and hugging. One of the mothers sitting nearby caught Megan's confused expression. "Henry, the lollipop man, died," she whispered. "They found him in his flat around the corner. Been dead for 3 days. But Guthrie didn't tell them that, trying to keep it nice for the kids." 3 days? Megan whispered back. "Didn't anyone report him missing?" "Shh," hissed another mother. Megan watched the school captain read out the house points, but didn't hear a word the kid said. She couldn't shake the image of Henry's lifeless body lying on the floor, or in his bed, or in the bath, or maybe his favourite armchair. No one had missed him enough to go and knock on his door and see if he was okay. Henry, the sweet old man who'd smiled at her every day as he escorted them across the road, was dead. Henry, who some mornings seemed to need his stop sign more as a support than a signal. Henry, who never tired of applying the appropriate superlatives to the day's weather, had died. Alone. How did someone end up so alone that no one knew he was dead for 3 whole days? It didn't bear thinking about. Megan felt a crushing sadness and gripped the edge of the chair beneath her to shift her attention from the searing heat behind her ribcage. But why? She hardly knew the old guy. As the school band butchered Another One Bites the Dust, they may have been shit, but their song choice couldn't have been more morbidly apt, Megan mentally ran through her weekly routine, trying to figure out the most obvious moment in any given week when anyone, would find her body. The thought of Bryce finding it made her eyes shut. The thought of Oscar. She gritted her teeth behind closed lips. Stop it. He'd be long gone. As her mother predicted, Oscar might move to Tokyo or Vancouver or Perth after school. He might never call or visit his old mum. As for friends, Megan's social life was non-existent. When Bryce played Daddy every second weekend, she spent the weekend watching Netflix in her trackies. She had Lizzie and Sam on weekday mornings, but once primary school was done and their kids caught the bus to their respective high schools, her 2 mates would no longer be part of her daily life. As for her work life, 90% of Megan's business involved being on the computer, so there wasn't a lot of human interaction, aside from the odd face-to-face meeting with a new supplier or social media strategist. She doubted a single one of her thousands of Instagram followers would be checking on her when she was 70 and living in a one-bedder in the burbs. Her mum wouldn't be around forever, and Matt didn't want kids, so there'd be no nieces or nephews to make sure old Auntie Megsy was getting by. Megan's future wasn't looking particularly well populated. Megan suddenly felt unstable, as if she might tip sideways and fall off her chair. The credible vision of solitude and loneliness that could be her future settled on her shoulders like a stone gargoyle. Megan? She snapped out of it to find Penny Guthrie standing over her, staring at her curiously. Assembly was over, and kids around her were heading back to their classrooms or packing up chairs. A flushed blonde girl with braces glared at Megan, impatient for her to get up so she could fold her chair and get back to the important business of being a 10-year-old. Megan stood up and the chair was whipped out from under her like a magician's tablecloth. "Hi, Penny," Megan said, feeling exposed. "Sorry, miles away." "Nice to see you at assembly." "Yeah," Megan said. "I wanted to talk to you about the school play." "Of course," Penny said. "I was going to email you today to ask for your working with children details." Through the window, Megan could see some of the older girls placing flowers outside the gate, the spot where Henry had chatted to the kids as they entered the school. "Also, Miss Mitchell has just had some upsetting news about her father's health," Penny interrupted. "So she might need to take some time off here and there." "Oh, well, so do you think you could maybe help out a bit more than expected?" Penny sounded desperate. "Maybe help come up with an idea for the junior school concert? It only needs to be an hour long and Miss Mitchell has a lot on her plate with the grade 5 and 6 kids and their play, The Bunyip Who Slept Through Christmas." Megan frowned. "The what now?" "It's a Christmas play she bought off the internet," Penny said, looking unimpressed. "A bunyip sleeps in on Christmas morning and his emu and kangaroo friends have to wake him up." Gripping stuff. "Indeed. So it would be nice to have something with a different feel for the younger kids' show." Megan could see Henry's lollipop hat hanging off the side of the whiteboard over Penny's shoulder. Someone had drawn a bunch of red, blue and yellow flowers beside it. Fuck it. "That's what I was going to talk to you about, actually," she said. "I've got a few ideas, but I'll narrow them down and get back to you." Penny's face broke into a relieved smile. "Oh, excellent!" Excellent. She clapped her hands together. Oh, I can't wait to hear what you've come up with. Thank you, Megan. Thank you very much. What is wrong with me? Megan thought, walking back to her car. How had news of a Lollipop Man's death turned her into a person who was going to get back to the principal with concert ideas? Maybe she was getting her period. That must be it. She'd revisit backing out of this stupid concert once her body had sorted itself out. Keep still, please. How much longer? The more you move, the longer it will take. Megan raised the camera to her eye again and Oscar sighed, making Megan feel like the worst mother in the world. She knew he hated posing for chill photos, but she had no choice. The stock had arrived 2 days late and she needed to get images of the new Westie Kids jeans out to her subscribers and onto the socials before end of business. Sorry, mate, Megan said, snapping photos of Oscar with his hands in his pockets and a wistful look on that face that was so like Bryce's. Just a couple more. She checked the viewfinder and gave him a thumbs up. You're free. Off you go. But Oscar didn't move. Hey, Mum, why didn't Daddy come to Careers Day? Wow. The smack in the face that was a little kid's non sequiturs. He was away. With Adam? Yeah, with Adam. Oscar crinkled his nose, imitating the action he'd seen from Ellie when this topic of conversation came up. Was Daddy working? Bryce worked in PR and often travelled interstate. Last week, he'd gone to Sydney and taken Adam with him so they could celebrate their 3-year anniversary and impending nuptials. They'd overloaded Instagram's servers with the number of photos they shared. Megan's personal favourite was a selfie of the two of them at a bar, lurid cocktails held up to their chins, the opera house in the background, the two equally gorgeous-looking men beaming into each other's faces, flushed and happy. The caption read, "When in Rome, do as the divas do, am I right? 3 perfect years with this 10. Looking forward to 100 more." It was typical of the nonsensical bullshit Bryce posted most days. Another was a pic of the two of them in full Spanish dance pose, roses between their teeth. His caption for this glorious moment read, "When the passion takes you, you must dance the flamingo." Not a deliberate mistake. He'd suggested he and Megan take flamingo lessons many years earlier. If Bryce was Melbourne's answer to Ryan Gosling, Adam was his gay Chris Hemsworth. Tall, like Bryce, Adam had the same chiselled jaw, floppy hair, and abs to die for. He was a personal trainer, after all. But Adam also wore glasses, which made him even hotter. It was kind of a working holiday. Oscar looked at his mum the way you'd expect a 6-year-old to look when faced with such a glaring oxymoron. He wanted to be there, she added. But that's not the same as being there. Hey, have you thought about where you want to go for your birthday this year? Oscar's face brightened and Megan congratulated herself for the genius move of changing the subject. It didn't matter that Oscar's birthday was over 3 months away. He forgot most topics when the B word was mentioned. The zoo! The zoo? Megan immediately regretted her decision to let Oscar choose his own birthday destination. You don't just want to go to Tweedledum's? Megan had assumed he'd picked the local play centre for his birthday outing in November. He and his friends could run themselves ragged in the safe confines of Tweedledum's walls, while Megan sat in the play centre cafe with a latte and her laptop. Oscar firmly shook his head. The zoo, please. Okay. At least she'd have Lizzie to help. Oscar and Max were good mates. And I want Daddy to come too, Oscar said quietly, looking nervous. Is that okay? Megan's heart broke. The poor kid was scared to ask if his own dad could attend his birthday party. Of course! She forced a smile onto her face. I'll let him know. Yay! Oscar cried. Can I play on your phone? No, Megan said, but you can do some drawing. There's blank paper on my desk. Oscar raced out and Megan sat down, opened her laptop and connected her camera. Come on, she muttered as her laptop took an age to start up. She had so much work to do, so many emails, and still had to get dinner sorted before taking Oscar to footy training because Bryce was in Sydney again. She felt exhausted just thinking about the next few hours. Mum, can you come here? Megan closed her eyes briefly and exhaled. Where are you? She called, getting up. In your office. What are you? Megan's voice faded away as she entered the front room to the sight of Oscar at her desktop computer. Why are you still in here? She said. You were supposed to get some paper and draw. Megan clocked the panicked look on her son's face, and a cold tingling ran all the way from her forehead down to her stomach. She walked over to look at the screen. Blank. The cursor blinked at her dumbly. I just wanted to do the eggs game. Oscar? Megan tried to keep her voice calm as she pressed Control-Z. Undo. Oh God, undo. Nothing. Where are the words that were on the screen? They went away, Oscar said softly, his lip trembling. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Half a day's work. 2,000 words of copy for her subscribers that were supposed to go out tonight. Gone. Shit! A trembling lip gave way to wailing as tears spilled from Oscar's eyes, and Megan was torn between the impulse to cuddle him to her chest or throw him out the window. In the end, she did neither. Go to your room, she said quietly. I've told you not to touch the computer when I'm not with you. Now, you need to think about what you've done. I'm very disappointed. Oscar ran out of the office and she heard his wails move through an impressive crescendo. Megan flopped down onto her desk chair and pulled the keyboard towards her. Looks like it's takeaway tonight, she thought, beginning to type.
Sam. Via text. 10:07 a.m. Sam. Where are you now? X. Bridget. BNE. Sam. Question mark? Bridget. Brisbane? Sam. Oh yeah, of course. Ha. X. 11:17 a.m. S. You still landing 7-ish? X. B. Far as I know. S. Yay. Missing you. XXOO. 1:48 p.m. S. I'll let the kids stay up a bit so you can give them a cuddle. X. B. No, don't do that. They need sleep. S. Fair enough. Good point. X. S. If they're asleep, maybe we could have a cuddle. XX. 1:52 p.m. S. Sorry. Airports aren't sexy, are they? 1:56 p.m. S. Bridge? B. Need to get report done before boarding. S. No worries. Sorry. Safe flight. X.
Lizzie. Babies have always fascinated me. I was the clucky kid who asked people, usually Abella's customers, if I could hold their baby. I loved their tiny fingernails and wrinkly hands, their smooth skin and chubby legs, and their smell. Divine. When I had my own, I'd spend hours gazing at them. During college, a dickhead stoner bailed me up at a party one night and spent a solid hour informing me that Losing my mother at 4 had created feelings of abandonment that had subconsciously steered me towards midwifery. Who knows? Maybe Dickhead Stoner was right. Regardless, I love being around babies and births, and that's my job, so happy days. And walking into St. Vincent's for my Monday afternoon shift, I was happier still, because for the next 10 hours, I'd be flat out, soothing, screaming almost mothers, mopping up amniotic fluid and gas bagging at the midwife station, which was the perfect diversion from my worrying thoughts. Hey girl! Aileen was filling out cards at the midwife station. How was your morning? I asked, throwing my bag under the desk. Oh, bedlam, she said, rolling her eyes. First delivery was a proper conehead, and the mom was convinced she'd birthed an alien. Then I had to confiscate a selfie stick of some fecking influencer mom who was trying to live stream her own labour. I had to up her pethidine to get the stupid thing off her. The perfect diversion. The only one left awake to greet me in our dark, silent house that night was our Labrador, Bailey, and she jumped up and down like a lunatic. Look, it's her. I don't believe it. She came back. Again. Once Bailey had recovered from the excitement and was back on her bed, I headed for the kitchen. A cup of tea and Vegemite on toast were my post-work sustenance after a long shift, and my God, it had been long. 3 Caesars, 2 breech, and 1 teenager who was dropped off and left on her own. After she'd popped out a perfect 9-pound boy in under 3 hours, she asked if she could move in with me. As I sat munching toast and sipping tea, I could see my laptop through the open door of the office, displaying a random selection of family photos. There was no reason I couldn't have another crack at finishing the letter now. I was wide awake, and there'd be no interruptions. But even when presented with such a rare and ideal working environment, I had no clue how to start. I thought back to when Rick Cook and I had first met, 1,000 years ago, when we were both playing under-17 soccer. I'd been playing soccer for almost 10 years by then. After losing Mum, Dad had retreated into himself, and it was Auntie Carmen to the rescue when she volunteered him to coach the under-10s at the Williamstown Soccer Club. Dad told her he didn't have time for that bullshit, but Auntie Carmen was unfazed. He loved it, of course, and his scout's eyes soon turned towards his 2 elder sons, then 7 and 9, dreaming of lucrative contracts and endorsement deals. Dad's dreams died a quick death when he saw the boys play. Soccer balls and Christopher's feet were like magnets with the same polarity, and Joey was scared of the ball, running behind his teammates or the opposition if it came near him. And Lucas was only 3, so any chance he had at world glory was still a way off. Dad was describing this epic family tragedy to a customer at the restaurant one day when the man turned and nodded at me. I was 6 at the time, and my best friend Melissa and I were drawing at a table. I was probably drawing babies. "What about her?" the man said. "She's a girl." Members of the Maltese community who inhabited the western suburbs of Melbourne in the 1980s found the idea of a girl playing soccer both insane and hilarious. So? Football too rough, Dad said, wagging his hairy knuckles in the guy's face. "My Lizzie get hurt. No good for girls." "Rubbish," the guy laughed. "Look at Martina Navratilova and Chris Evert." "Pah," Dad spat. "That tennis. Girls' game." "Oh, don't say that to John McEnroe," the guy said. "He'd crack his racket across your head. Navratilova too. They can both bloody ilat il blanen." "You should think about it, Joseph," the guy said, before walking out. Auntie Carmen overheard this whole conversation and relayed it to me a few years later, although I'm not sure an 8-year-old needed to know that her father said John McEnroe and Martina Navratilova could lick his balls. But that's Auntie Carmen, loves details. The customer must have made an impact, because soon after, Dad announced that I was going to training with him. I wasn't sure I wanted to go, but a wink and a nod from Auntie Carmen told me I should. Chris and Joey thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard and made lots of hilarious comments like, "Don't break a nail," and "The round thing is the ball and you're supposed to kick it." I don't remember that first training session. All I know is that soccer always felt effortless. Running, connecting with the ball, and weaving around other players all came very easily. After that, I was Dad's great sporting hope. It took a while for the community to get behind Dad's all-girls soccer team, but when the felines started winning games, we soon built up a decent following. I could have filled a small shipping container with the best player trophies I collected over the years, which probably would have meant more if I'd loved the game. Soccer was okay, but it wasn't a passion for me. Dad was no Damir Dokic, and I was never forced to keep playing, but he couldn't have been prouder or happier, which was my main motivation to do so. I eventually convinced Melissa to join the club, and soon after that, I met Rick. Suddenly, my life became a whole lot more entrenched in the soccer scene. The last place I ever expected to meet my first boyfriend was the soccer club. Most of the boys I met there were stupid, obnoxious, or arrogant. I wasn't such a great catch myself in my early teens with my puffy brown hair, gappy teeth, and no boobs. Young Lizzie Abella was usually dressed in a poncho of some sort with brown velvet cords and desert boots. Basically your stock standard, unattractive child. By 15, I'd developed C-cup boobs and ditched the ponchos and velvet cords, but still felt the pressure to disprove my classmates' theory that I was a permanent resident of Lesbos. The fact that I lived and breathed soccer didn't exactly help dispel the rumours. Whilst the other girls at school were donning eyeliner and lip gloss or putting blonde tips in their carefully blow-dried hair, I had zero interest in that girly shit. My thick Maltese mop was usually pulled back into a low ponytail and only washed once a week. I wore no makeup, Dad would have killed me, and whichever pair of jeans and t-shirt was closest to my bed in the morning. Still, by the end of year 8, my fair-haired, green-eyed, extremely Anglo best mate Melissa and I somehow found ourselves part of a group. Unfortunately, I soon made the mistake of announcing that I was bored with the "who is the cutest surfy" conversation and suggested we play down ball instead. The girls looked at me like I'd just dropped my pants and shat on the oval. That afternoon, as Melissa and I sat at our corner table in Abella's drinking Blue Heaven milkshakes and doing algebra worksheets, my best friend informed me that unless I changed my attitude towards boys, the other girls wanted me out of the group. The thought of wandering the playground alone like a social pariah with BO for the next 3 years was horrifying. Chrissy Alfonsi told everyone you must be a leso if you don't like talking about boys, Melissa whispered across the table. She said that she didn't want to invite a big les like you to her slumber party because you'd probably try to finger her in her sleep. Yuck! I cried, as if... Lizzie! Dad shouted from the kitchen. This is a place of workplace. Dad was prepping for another busy Friday night, his least favourite job. So I decided not to point out that the restaurant was empty. His yelling was 10 times louder than mine. "This is a place of workplace" was the worst sentence ever. "Sorry, Mr. Abella," Melissa said, giving Dad her sweetest smile. "Ah, you're good girls," Dad said, polishing a soup spoon as if the Queen herself might use it. "Suck up," I whispered. "So," Melissa whispered, returning to our important agenda item, "what are you going to do?" I tapped my pen on my teeth. I guess I could pretend that I liked talking about boys. Melissa nodded her approval. "You should make up a story about meeting a cute boy at training." There are no cute boys at training. I said make up a story. Okay, I said, pissed off with the whole situation. Unfortunately, I made the monumental error of not running the story by Melissa before relaying it to the rest of the group the following morning. The scenario began with me strolling around the soccer ground when, out of the nearby bushes, I was grabbed and thrown onto the grass. I was shitting myself, I told the wide-eyed girls gathered around me, but I yielded to his firm embrace as he kissed me tenderly, and the sweet lasting kiss lasted for hours before the stranger, who I'm almost positive was a surfie, jumped up and ran away, leaving me weak with desire. I'd memorised most of this from a passage in one of Auntie Carmen's Mills and Boon books. Melissa gawked as if she was watching rhinoceroses mating as I relayed this tale of passion and what was basically sexual assault. What was a gorgeous surfie doing in the bushes at some soccer ground? Chrissy Alfonsi. Trust that smug little bitch to apply logic to my deeply flawed fantasy. Probably, having a nap? Chrissy smirked before flicking her hair and walking away, closely followed by the rest of the group. I said make up a story about meeting a cute boy, Melissa hissed once they were gone, not being attacked by one. But despite the reputation I developed around school as the bush rape girl, I refused to backpedal on my tale of the soccer ground kiss bandit. A few months later, I managed to attract the attention of a greasy-haired, pimply-faced St. Mark's College boy at the brother-sister school's annual disco. It proved to be an all-round disappointing experience. It was all tongues, saliva and bad breath, and lasted a whopping 30 seconds. I never heard from the nameless Catholic boy, with the kissing technique of an epileptic lizard, again, but I could finally say, without a hint of an overblown lie, that I'd been kissed. Chrissy Alfonsi and the rest of my classmates had witnessed our 30 seconds of teenage glory, and finally, the soccer ground kiss bandit became a distant memory. Rick Cook came into my life soon after this triumph. Melissa and I were sharing a Gatorade after a particularly exhausting under-17s game when a pack of boys stampeded into the clubhouse and arranged themselves around a table like a fake gang in a school play. If you squinted, they resembled a group of orangutans, beating on the table, hopping up and down in their chairs, and screeching. Melissa and I were not impressed. Rick stood out from the buffoonery. As his mates ricocheted around the table, trying to prove chaos theory, Rick sat still, only moving his head to engage with his teammates. A large crumpled sports bag sat on the floor between his feet. Sticking out of the zip pocket was Stephen King's The Shining, which I had devoured earlier that year. I was intrigued by this teenage soccer-playing boy who read books and kept sneaking glances at him, gradually giving him the full once-over. A shock of thick brown blonde hair that stuck up in front, tanned legs, flushed cheeks, and huge brown eyes. I was in the midst of studying those tanned legs when he looked up and smiled "Sorry my mates are such fuckwits" smile at me. I blushed. Not only was he considerate, mature, and cute, he was also the first boy who'd ever paid a single jot of attention to me at the club. At training that night, I could feel Rick's eyes on me from the opposite pitch and ramped up my fancy footwork. A week later, kicking at the grass and fumbling his words, Rick asked me to go to the video arcade with him after Saturday's game. Melissa covered for me, and over hot chips and cola, I learnt that Rick had also lost his mum when he was younger. I don't know if it was the mother hen in me or teenage lust, but I was smitten. We shared a quick, surprisingly tender kiss behind the Warriors of Fate machine before Dad picked me up, and the next day, Rick, asked me to go with him over the phone. I said yes. Melissa, Chrissy Alfonsi, and the whole world rejoiced. Auntie Carmen helped me construct a plan for Rick to slowly win Dad over before we shared the news with him. Rick spent weekends helping Dad pack up equipment, hand out raffle tickets, and man the barbecue for a whole season. It worked. Rick could be very charming when he wanted to be, and Dad liked him. Melissa started dating Rick's mate, Lockie, and soon we'd expanded into a core group of 8. We were a tight bunch, going to the arcade or bowling on Friday nights, playing soccer matches on Saturdays, then staying at the clubhouse for barbecues and discos. We lived and breathed soccer, the club, and each other. Rick was always the quietest of the pack. The other boys were raucous and loved making comments on which soccer chick was the hottest, but Rick always stayed close to me and didn't say much. The boys nicknamed him Mouse, but when we were alone, he spoke about books, dead mothers, and his feelings, things he'd never discuss around our friends. He made me feel beautiful, clever, and adored, and found everything I said fascinating. Rick's intense, loving focus gave me a new confidence, and I began to see myself the way he saw me. Suddenly, my puffy hair, gappy teeth, and curvy figure was sexy and unique. He made me endless mixtapes, most of which included at least 2 Phil Collins and/or Bryan Adams songs. No 16-year-old could have asked for more. The first time we had sex, it was suitably awkward and painful, but Rick was a patient lover and we soon got the hang of it. It would be a few years before I experienced my first orgasm, but back then foreplay was way more enjoyable than the main event, so I didn't mind. Location was obviously an issue. My house wasn't an option, so we'd usually go to Rick's house on Saturday nights and wait for his dad to pass out in front of the TV before sneaking into Rick's room. The Cooks lived in a rundown weatherboard near the club, and Rick's dad, Brett, lived off benefits after an injury at the Toyota factory. They had very little money, and Brett drank a lot of what they did have. Rick was super skinny when I met him, but we thickened him up with pastizzis and milkshakes over the years. He was ashamed of his poverty, and as we lay in his single bed together, he'd tell me how he was going to make something of himself and buy a house as nice as mine one day. Throughout those formative years, Rick was there, facing and surviving all the milestones of adolescence alongside me. I sometimes had a nagging sensation that maybe I didn't love him as much as I should, that some vital part of me was being overlooked or phased out. But he was a good man, and I didn't want to break his heart. So for a long time, I chose to ignore those feelings. "Hey, you coming to bed?" Greg was standing in the doorway in his boxers, rubbing one hand back and forth over the top of his bed hair and reaching for the fridge door with the other. My cup of tea sat on the kitchen bench, now stone cold. How long had I been sitting there? "Yeah, coming now." In bed, Greg snuggled into my back and rested his arm on my thigh. "How was work?" "Fine. Busy." So, Max brought it up at dinner again. "Oh, no. Why not just let him try out?" Greg murmured, patting my hip. Max had been begging to play soccer for the past few months. I said we couldn't afford it, which was a lie. I had no desire to return to the world of soccer. "Talk tomorrow," I said, reaching back to put my hand over his. "I'm shattered." But I wasn't shattered. I was very much awake. Greg was snoring in less than a minute, an infuriating ability possessed by every man I'd ever known, while I lay on my side staring at him in the darkness and trying to imagine how he would react when he knew the truth about his wife, about Rick and his wife. Would he hate me? Would he decide he couldn't stay in a marriage with someone he didn't trust? And really, if he did decide that, who could blame him? Megan. Cody Fletcher at cfletcher58 blog. Baytree primary parents and teachers should be ashamed. How could everyone in that community fail to notice the absence of their lollipop man for 3 whole days? A man who has worked the school crossing for over 15 years. It's disgraceful. This is an uncaring and selfish community that needs to take a long, hard look at itself. The fuck? The tweet on Megan's phone was slightly blurry, thanks to 3 glasses of wine in the late hour, but there was no mistaking the tone. A quick Google search told Megan that Cody Fletcher was proud mum of 2 beautiful children and author of the mummy blog Mother Unfolding. Had she been sober, Megan might simply have grimaced, acknowledged that Cody Fletcher wasn't exactly wrong, and scrolled down to the next post on her Twitter feed. But Megan wasn't sober. She was drunk and still feeling fragile after the social media wormhole she'd descended into hours earlier when she'd tortured herself by scrolling through Bryce's Instagram feed. If the images of Bryce and Adam's blinding happiness weren't enough mental torture for her, Megan had then decided it would be an excellent idea to scroll through comments on Bryce's mindfulness Facebook page. Wasn't this guy married to the chick from that ad? Yeah, she's hot. Mustn't have been hot enough. Memories of that night had then rampaged through Megan's drunken mind as she reached for the bottle again and thought for the millionth time how she hadn't even seen the end of her marriage coming. Back then, Megan had been so busy with Chill and a gorgeous toddler that she hadn't noticed the growing distance between her and her husband. So when Bryce told her he'd joined a gym, Megan was encouraging and maybe even a little insensitive. Good idea, babe, she'd said. Don't want to end up with a dad bod. Gym started as a once-a-week thing, then twice, and soon Bryce was heading off every night. Sometimes he'd be gone for over 3 hours. Looking back, Megan couldn't believe her stupidity, but then she was usually fast asleep by 9 p.m, exhausted by the business and from chasing Oscar around all day. Sex had been great in the beginning. Bryce was a gentle and attentive lover, but was definitely a lights-off kind of guy. Once Oscar was born, their sex life came to a screeching halt, and she didn't even hear Bryce getting home late at night. If she had been awake, she'd have noticed that his gym clothes usually smelt as fresh and clean as when he'd left. Very late one night, a few months after he'd joined the gym, Bryce stepped on one of Oscar's toys as he crept through the front door. It was one of those annoying Wiggles dolls that sang the whole chorus of Big Red Car at full volume when you pushed its stomach. Whoever programmed those things had a deep hatred of parents. In a demented way, she still blamed the stupid, smiley yellow Wiggle for shattering her ignorant bliss. The sound of the Wiggles' tinny voices echoing down the hallway woke Megan, and her first thought was that it was morning and Oscar was playing with that stupid bloody doll again. Then she noticed the time and saw that Bryce wasn't in bed beside her. When she opened the bedroom door, she saw Bryce standing in the hallway, desperately attempting to muffle the sound of the noisy doll. "What are you doing?" Megan whispered. "It's almost 2:00. She gestured for Bryce to move away from Oscar's bedroom and into the lounge. He followed, the doll finally falling silent as Megan shut the door behind them. "What the fuck, Bryce?" Bryce stared, his eyes too wide, and an icy sensation crept across Megan's chest. Wherever he'd been, whatever he'd been doing, it wasn't good. She nodded at the gym bag slung over his shoulder. "And please, don't tell me you've been at the gym." Her voice was already starting to crack. "Some of us went for drinks after—" "Don't lie to me, Bryce," Megan hissed, trembling. Bryce slumped onto the couch, cradling his head in his hands. "Who is she?" "No, Megs. Bullshit." Megan collapsed onto the armchair before her legs went out from under her. "Who is she?" Bryce looked up with a pained expression. "It's a him." Megan felt as though an entire layer of herself turned to ash in that moment and fell on the floor. Her first reaction was to laugh. It seemed so ridiculous, like something from a bad Aussie soap opera. It was fucking ridiculous. Thoughts swirled through her brain as Bryce divulged all. He'd met Adam in his first week at the gym. They'd made small talk over elliptical training machines, but soon it was a pressed juice at the gym cafe after a workout, where they'd swapped life stories and secrets. Bryce had suspected Adam was gay, but had never expected to fall in love with him. "Why would you?" Megan finally exploded. "When you're straight!" "That's the thing," Bryce said, starting to cry. "I've always suspected that I might not be 100% straight. But then I met you and, well, I blocked it out. I still noticed guys, but you made me happy." "Oh, well, that's good to know." "Then Oscar came along and I accepted this was my life now," Bryce continued. "A straight man with a kid, a wife and a mortgage." "Jesus, you make it sound so ordinary," Megan said, tears running down her cheeks. "Once I met Adam," Bryce's face brightened at the mention of his name, "I knew it was right." Megan decided she was dreaming. Yes, that was it. She was actually fast asleep with Bryce beside her in bed. He would be mock outraged when she told him about it in the morning. "Gee, thanks, babe," he'd say. "Next thing you'll be dreaming I'm a Catholic priest." But Megan couldn't make herself wake up. And when the sun began streaming through the window a few hours later and Oscar called out from his cot, she knew it was real. She and Bryce had stayed up all night, talking, crying, shouting and hugging. But at the end of it all, she'd lost her husband. Megan rubbed her eyes, surprised to find her cheeks wet. She took another swig of the wine and picked up her phone to reread the tweet. "Fuck you, Cody Fletcher," she muttered. And that's when a more than slightly drunk Megan began typing a response at 12:35 a.m., her tolerance, self-esteem and self-control at an all-time low, but her crosshairs in sharp, sharp focus.
Sam. 2 Jack was here at hotmail.com from Sam Hatfield Chef at bigpond.com. Subject: Updates galore. Hey dickhead. Bridget got back last night. Multiple stops in Southeast Asia. Lucky thing had 2 nights free in Hong Kong. She works like a mad person, so she deserves the downtime. All your suggestions for increasing staying power after a period of celibacy were much appreciated and disturbingly inventive. Didn't matter in the end. Bridge was exhausted. As per your advice, I still tried it on, and I was pretty smooth. I acknowledged her obvious fatigue, then told her how much I'd missed her, and said she deserved some relaxation, and that I'd give her a massage before bed. And for the record, I would have happily left it at a massage if that's all she wanted. If it led to something slightly more amorous, happy days. But when I suggested the massage, Bridge's immediate response was, "Oh, Jesus, Sam, just have a wank." Pretty definitive, huh? Bridge went to bed, leaving a suitcase smack in the middle of the hallway. I moved it so the kids wouldn't come a cropper in the middle of the night going to the toilet. I polished off about a pint of Finlandia, then fell asleep on the couch watching a doco about some nutjob free climber. This morning was a hoot. I was still asleep on the couch, cradling the vodka bottle, When Tyler sat on my chest and patted my cheek, I asked where Mum was, and he told me she was in the study. So I dragged myself off the couch, put the bottle back in the cupboard and went to the study. I made the mistake of making a question sound like a statement. You haven't done the lunches. Bridge doesn't respond well to statements from me anymore. She's come to expect a certain level of subservience. She shrugged like a mob boss and said she had work to do. She asked if I remembered what work was. I left her alone and made the lunches. Getting out of the house and into the schoolyard is always a nice feeling. Fresh air and fresh people and a few minutes of freedom. Drop-off is like a little oasis. At one point this morning, Megan said something about me not shaving, then reached out and rubbed my stubble with the back of her fingers. It was hardly a tender moment, but it made me realise it's been a while since I've been touched. And no, dickhead, I'm not including myself in that. I hear you, you filthy animal. But you know what I mean? It was nice. Affectionate. If Lizzie was there, she would have made it into a thing and we all would have laughed about it. But I'm glad it was let be this morning. S. X.
Reruns of Stingers. Fucking perfect. It's no fun watching shit TV on your own. If we were watching something bad together, we could laugh about it and revel in how shit it was. But on my own, it's just me staring at an average television show because I'd rather do this than sit here in silence. The quiet in this place is like an enemy now. Whenever it's really quiet, I get scared of moving around too much. Silence paralyses me. I find myself standing in one spot for I don't even know how long, looking around the apartment and trying to figure out where the attack will come from. The attack of what? No idea, but I know it's coming. And I always imagine that she's still here somewhere. That whatever's about to crash through the window or break down the door will be met with the invincible wrath of me, the protector. I muttered to myself the things I'd say to the intruders, clenching my fists and starting to sweat from the fear and excitement of it. Because if I could show her how courageous I am, she'd never leave. She'd understand how much I love her, and she'd want to come back. But it's fiction. I'm using hypothetical, imaginary scenarios to try to win her back. She's gone. My rational brain has processed that and filed it away in understood. But I don't care if it's impossible or hopeless, because I don't believe in those things anymore. I can't believe in the finality of this, because it isn't over. Even if nobody else understands. Even if she doesn't. I do. If it's not meant to be, why is she the thing that my mind jumps to whenever it has a moment to itself? Why is she the connective tissue that makes everything I think about make sense? Because she's the one. Even sitting here watching Stingers, it's her that makes me smile because every time Peter Phelps comes on the screen, she quotes his immortal line from Point Break. Death on a stick out there, mate. She's the reason I'm sitting here, surrounded by filth and scared of going outside and smiling all at the same time. She's the reason I know I'm going to be okay. Because she's the one. And one day, she'll realise that too.
This ends CD3.